Supremacy Games. Chapter 1076-1100. I see. Felix nodded in understanding as he watched Cyclope walking towards a solar flare. Although they were exposed directly with the sun, it didn't seem like anything was affected inside the forge. Felix could still breathe and move normally. When he got used to the light, he finally figured out how was it possible. What kind of glass is capable of surviving in this hellish environment? Felix's eyes were widened in disbelief after spotting a screen of thick glass separating them from the sun. That's not glass. Cyclope smiled. It's a new type of metal created by merging salamander metal, transparent metal, and other materials you wouldn't know. Truly astonishing. As the metal primogenitor, he was the only one with enough understanding of metals to start creating new unique varieties. After Cyclope put some distance from Felix, he extended his palm forward and manifested a towering black crucible one. Then, he molded it with two metallic pillars made out of salamander metal. While the pillars remained unchanged, the crucible started to turn extremely red like it was about to melt off. However, no matter how hot it turned, its shape remained the same. Just extraordinary. Felix mewed in awe at the capabilities of metal element in the right hands. Just like gemstone and sand element, metal elementalists were capable of commanding any kind of existing metal in this universe. There was an unfathomable number of unique metals in this universe. Why doesn't Cyclope have any descendants? Felix asked this burning question. He believed that if Cyclope had any descendants, they would have been considered to be in the top 20 at least with their element. Unfortunately, there wasn't any metal elementalist in this universe besides the beasts, and humans, who integrate with said beasts. He had descendants just like the rest of us, and they were pretty active during the early years of primogenitor era. Lady Sphinx shared, too bad, at the end of the primogenitor's era, their numbers had been diminished to an extinction level. But, why did Cyclope allow it? Felix frowned, believing that Cyclope shouldn't be that cold-blooded to see his race going extinct and not do anything about it. At that time, he was too consumed with deciphering the divine codex and forging divine equipments. Thor remarked, "We barely saw him even when he was forging our stuff. Don't even mention his descendants, he completely secluded himself." The final nail in the coffin was when he entered the illusion world to recover his mental health. Lady Sphinx added, "What remained of his race were utterly erased by unforgiving time." I see. Felix knew that the universe was extremely hard to live in at that age. If an already weakened race was left all alone without their guardian, their only fate was damnation. It was quite a shame as the metal element could be proclaimed as lost and forgotten as well. Ka thud. Felix focused back on Cyclope after seeing him dumping what remained out of Mjolnir inside the crucible. Even though the broken pieces were as big as mountains, the crucible wasn't filled to even half. Next, Cyclope beamed some of Felix's materials from his spatial ring. Naturally, it was Cyclope's main spatial ring, so it was immune to the heat and possibly most other elements. Oh, he didn't throw in ancestral dragon scales. Felix commentated after seeing that Cyclope had mixed in only 3 materials with the broken Mjolnir. Now, we wait until everything is melted off and mixed together. Cyclope informed after he returned to Felix. How long will it take? Felix asked. A couple of days or more. Cyclope answered. That long? It would have been taken even more than a century, if the divine codex was still written on the hammer. Cyclope shared. I see. Well, it did make sense that for a masterpiece like Mjolnir to have an insane level of toughness that even a star would struggle to melt it off. Let's get out of here. Cyclope walked away and Felix followed him shortly. After they left the main forge, both of them reduced their sizes back to normal. Still, Cyclope was a verified giant. If you want to leave, you are free to go. Cyclope permitted with a faint smile. I will call you when I finish writing the last divine letter on it. How long will it take to forge the complete body without the divine codex? Felix asked with a curious look. Less than a week. Then, I prefer to stay and watch it happen if possible. Felix decided. Felix was already told that structure of the weapon was the easiest part to handle and took no time to finish for someone like Cyclope. However, writing the Divine Codex on every inch of such a humongous weapon was the real challenge. The worst part? If Cyclope made a tiny mistake in his writing, he couldn't just erase it and try again. He required melting off the finished structure and start all over again from scratch. That's why the process would take a century give or take, as immense focus and dedication had to be preset to bring this masterpiece into life. By the way, have you made up your mind on what abilities you want your weapon to have? Cyclope shared, I can't start writing the Divine Codex until I know the full picture. I am still quite indecisive about this. Felix sighed in frustration. He was told that he could have 10 unique abilities on his hammer. He was given a list of possible abilities for this specific design to choose from. Naturally, Felix had already picked a couple of similar abilities to his crescent axe, as he had already established a well-put fighting style around them. The first one was the boomerang ability that allowed Felix to throw his axe anywhere and return to him without needing to control it manually. The second one was its ability to take the sickle's form. That's why he was asked to get World Tree First Root, as it would allow him to split the axe and the hammer into two separate weapons and wield them from a distance with his vines. The last one had to be the targeting ability, as it ensured that his weapon would seek his enemy even if he threw it behind him. He had no need for the rest of the abilities from his crescent battle axe. As for the abilities from the given list, he naturally picked the size manipulation ability, as it allowed his weapon to match any size he picked, in turn, making it useful in all situations. Felix had trouble with the remaining 6 abilities. I am torn between choosing single elemental amplification or a universal one. Felix asked Cyclope, which one do you think it's best? Felix was having difficulty making a decision, since those two abilities had varied strengths and weaknesses. In the case of single elemental amplification, he could choose poison, lightning, or gemstone to be amplified by his weapon. The amplification would be on a crazy level, making him capable of turning normal lightning into another version capable of blowing off an entire planet. This was what Mjolnir had. On the other hand, universal elemental amplification would allow Felix to amplify any element he selected to add in the Divine Codex. This would allow him to amplify all of his elements equally. Though, the level of power-up wasn't comparable to the other ability. That's not for me to decide. Cyclope shook his head, you should come to your decision after studying your fighting style and how would it develop into. I understand. I will allow you a month to think it thorough. Cyclope informed, I will be starting writing the Divine Codex then when I finish with the blueprint. Blueprint? How else do you think abilities can be utilized by weapons? Cyclope chuckled, do you think I just write some random sentences, and they will work? A calculated blueprint is a must to connect all sentences with each other and the rest of the materials. Only then would it work. Sounds like a lot of work. Felix said with a tone filled with admiration. He really couldn't imagine anyone capable of going through all of this trouble and time for the sake of creating a weapon that didn't even belong to him. What's even more commendable was the fact that Cyclope wasn't getting paid for any of this. He was literally going to spend an entire century of his time to forge this weapon just because of a favor from an entertainment game. If he wasn't extremely passionate about his work, he wouldn't have accepted such a thankless job. I will make sure to give you the list of my decided abilities before I leave here. Felix promised, knowing that the sooner he made a decision, the easier it would be for Cyclope to create the blueprint. Make sure to have no regrets. Cyclope warned, the moment I receive the list, there is no modification. I understand. Felix nodded with a solemn expression. One metal container in which metals or other substances may be melted or subjected to very high temperatures. 3 days later, Felix and Cyclope had returned to the main forge, wearing the same goggles. Looks like it's ready for the cast. Cyclope shared as he glanced at the molten red metal inside the crucible. Without further ado, he picked it up with tongs and closed the wall behind him, returning the main forge into its normal brightness. Felix removed the goggles and wore his AP bracelets back on as well as his nano clothes. It looked like regardless of what he did, he always ended up in situations that required him to go nude. This is the cast. Felix wondered as he looked at a metallic container that was shaped into half a hammer and half an axe. Cyclope nodded and started pouring the molten material into the cast, filling it up to the brim. Then, he closed it and let it cool down for a bit. Felix remained silent and sat on the corner, watching him prepare the tools to start working on the hammer. The cast might give an accurate shape of the hammer, but it didn't mean that was the end of it. Now the real blacksmithing work would start. Ka thud. Cyclope opened the cast and picked up the glowing red hammer before putting it on an anvil. Although it was cool enough to solidify, Felix knew that it was still hot enough to be reformed. Cling! 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 As expected, Cyclope started to hammer it down in precise repeated motion, making him resemble the blacksmithing machines. What will happen when the hammer cools off completely while he wasn't done yet? Asna wondered with a curious tone. He will be forced to heat it again but not to the point of melting. Lady Sphinx said, but, I doubt it will reach that point as this wasn't a normal metal we are dealing with. Just like it took an insane amount of time for the material to get melted off, the heat wouldn't dissipate off it so soon. If it was anyone else, this still wouldn't matter much as they would be required to heat it up again. But this was Cyclope, the godfather of blacksmithing and forgery. If one person could shape up a piece of metal to his desired state in one single go, it would definitely be him. As anticipated, in less than 2 hours, the hammer was starting to turn slimmer, cleaner, and the edges were refined. Let's not speak about the axe's blade as it was so sharp. Felix felt like his eyes would be sliced apart if he stared at it too much. Still, Cyclope wasn't done hammering it down even when the heat started to wear off and the hammer's real color began to show. Naturally, he had already created a hole in the center of hammer for the vines to connect with it. A couple more hours. Did he finish? Asna glanced upward after the clinging noise finally stopped. I think so. Felix replied while peeking at Cyclope, who dropped the hammer finally. His muscular bulky body was covered completely in sweat, making him resemble a Greek god. Felix remained silent as he could see that Cyclope was studying the hammer. He kept turning it left and right while checking it out up close. After a few seconds, he put it down and murmured while scratching his bald scalp, "Looks like I have gotten rusty to make such a mistake." Mistake? Did he say a mistake? Felix sought confirmation with a speechless expression. Sorry boy, you have to stay a bit longer than I anticipated. Cyclope apologized while throwing the perfectly looking silver hammer into the crucible. Felix didn't even know how to react. He could only watch the wall getting opened again, exposing them to the star. May I ask what went wrong? Felix inquired. It looked perfect to me. Felix wasn't exaggerating as the silver hammer truly looked impeccable. You don't see what I see. Cyclope smiled kindly, I promised you a perfect masterpiece, and that's what you will get. Felix could only drop the subject and hope that Cyclope get back his mojo. He knew that obsessive perfectionists like him wouldn't hesitate to keep trying over and over again for eternity if it meant not finishing this step perfectly. Fortunately, grandmasters like Cyclopes allow themselves to make only one mistake. After 2 days to heat the hammer, Cyclope returned to beating it up until he was finally satisfied with the end result. Come closer and feel it. Cyclope permitted. Without delay, Felix appeared next to the hammer and caressed it gently with his hand. It's so smooth like I am touching silk. Felix remarked with a surprised look. Try to look into the hole. Cyclope smiled. Felix did as he was told and couldn't help but exclaim in shock, when did you make such veins within it? Felix ought to feel shocked as the interior of the hammer had many thin and long empty veins, spreading from the hole. Naturally, when I was hammering in it. Cyclope shared, I used my manipulation to create those veins. When it was cooled, the veins stabilized and didn't require my help to keep their shape. Just amazing. Felix didn't need to ask what those veins were for, as he knew that they were meant for the world tree first root. Now, the roots would be able to attach themselves with both the axe and the hammer. When they separate, Felix could wield them together like sickles. The divine ability would merely help Felix switch between forms, but it didn't mean that the hammer wasn't required to be first supporting the second form. Though, wouldn't this harm the integrity of the hammer? Felix asked. Felix believed that those veins might make his hammer a bit weaker and easier to break. Why do you think I decided to do it again? Cyclope smiled. The first one had a small vein knot in place, making the hammer in risk of being destroyed. But after fixing it, the weakness had disappeared. Cyclope assured, the hammer won't break as long as the vines entered those veins. You should know that stingy trees' vines are even harder than the entire hammer. After hearing so, Felix's worries were put at ease. Do you want to see how the final product will look like? Most definitely. Felix nodded. Cyclope beamed the shimmering white root and curled it around itself until it resembled a braided ponytail. Then, he gently pushed it through the hammer's hole. Come, give me your blood. Felix was taken aback by his request, but he still complied. He cut his palm and gave it to Cyclope. He held it above the hammer and poured the blood in the hole, and specially the white vine. The moment the blood reached the white vine, Felix was startled to see it moving on its own into a worm. That wasn't all, as the vine began to grow more branches, which ended up growing inside the hammer as well as around it. Okay, that's enough. Cyclope pushed Felix's palm away and started guiding the rest of the growing vines forcefully with his hands until they covered the entire bottom of the hammer. Since the white vines were emitting light, the entire hammer started to emit it as well, making it resemble a weapon used by an angel to damn the wicked. This is the rough version of how it would look like. Cyclope removed his hands after the vines stopped growing. It's actually exceeded what I had in mind. Felix praised with a satisfied expression. He loved every bit of the hammer as it looked unique and extraordinary just from a single glance. How about the ancestral golden scales and the nether steel? Felix suddenly inquired, feeling like the hammer was already perfect as it was. He had no idea what else could those two materials be used for. The ancestral golden scales would be used to cover the bottom of the handle to give you a better grip. Cyclope informed, I have a couple of ideas to integrate them more into the hammer's abilities. As for the nether steel, it will be used to cover the top of the hammer, giving it an even better protection. I can see it now. The bottom of the hammer was already protected heavily with the vines. Although the hammer itself was extremely tough, it wasn't bad to make it even tougher. Here, take it and go play it with it. Cyclope cracked his neck while yawning. I will be waiting for you at my room when you finalize your list. Thank you, Elder. Felix bowed deeply in appreciation and gratitude. Although the work wasn't over yet, Felix couldn't contain his happiness for even a little. He finally owned a divine weapon. It wasn't any divine weapon, it was a masterpiece that was on the same level as the greatest treasures in the universe. This bad boy would be the key to dealing with the Darkin faction and the other hidden monsters. By the way, be careful, it's quite heavy. How heavy can it be? Felix was too excited to mind Cyclope's warning as he swiftly reached out to the hammer and held it tightly in his grasp. Unfortunately, the moment Cyclope released his hand, Felix's smile stiffened as he felt like a baby holding into a 20 kg dumbbell. F***ck me. Boredom. Arg. Felix could only curse his confidence and stupidity after ending up getting his fingers crushed by the hammer smashing into the ground. The most shocking part? His size was at least 10 kilometers, making him receive an insane physical strength boost. Still, it wasn't enough to even lift the hammer. Don't mess up my forge. Cyclope ignored his painful cries and exited the forge, not bothering to save him. It was Felix's fault for ignoring his warning. Candace. A bit of help please. A couple of days later, Felix had finally made up his mind on the remaining abilities of the hammer. He handed the list to Cyclope and was informed that he would be called when he finished his work. By the way, have you decided on the name yet? Cyclope asked. Not yet. Felix smiled. I think the name will come to me on its own when the hammer is ready to be wielded by me. From his previous experience with the hammer, Felix knew that he wasn't ready yet to even lift it. Don't even mention using it as a weapon. Fortunately, he had an entire century to increase his strength and be worthy of wielding it. Some time later, Felix and Candace took off towards the Sunhold city after forging a cubic purplish metal that resembled the nether steel in almost all department. It wasn't hard to forge it when he had the help of Cyclope's automatons and all kinds of metals lying around. Now, Felix just hoped that no one would have entered the treasury in those days. Because of the short distance between Cyclope's forge and Sunhold, Candace arrived in no time. They went straight to the treasury. The moment Felix noticed that his note was untouched, he couldn't help but sigh in relief. Quickly, let's place the fake one. Felix rushed Candace to open a void rift for him. Felix took the note and beamed the fake copy on top of the platform, making sure that every corner was exactly the same. It's perfect. Felix commentated as he analyzed the fake copy. Unless they touched the metal, it should be enough to not raise suspicion. Not wanting to overstay his welcome, Felix returned inside the void rift and Candace closed it after him. Back to Furlund. Not yet, let's check the throne chamber. Felix said. He wanted to remove the last shred of doubt by seeing if the Emperor and his officials had any idea about this. Thankfully, nothing seemed out of the ordinary as they caught Emperor Local still forging while being nude and playing that irritating loud music. Only then was Felix relieved and closed this chapter in his life. At least for now. Welcome back, did you conclude your task without troubles? Selphie inquired with a charming smile. It was all right. Felix nodded as he stood near Selphie's room door. He returned a couple of hours ago and the first thing he did was check on Einir. When he saw that he was hanging out with his cousins in the city, he decided to return to the palace and get some runic training done. It would be foolish to make a move on Einir when he was with a company. So, do you want us to recap a little or straight off start with greater spells? Selphie asked after seeing Felix's intense desire to kick off their practice. Greater spells. You better be at your top concentration. Selphie warned, they are at least 10 times more complex than lesser spells. I am always focused. Felix replied composedly. When the training was over, Felix rejected Selphie's invitation to drink tea with her and went towards Einir's room. He found out that Einir was looking for him when he returned from his stroll in the city. Felix decided to do him a favor and pay him a personal visit. Knock knock. Who is it? Felix, I'm. The door was opened before Felix could finish the first half of his sentence. Someone is eager to see his maker. Asna snickered mockingly after seeing Einir's brightened expression. Brother Felix, you really didn't have to come all the way here. I would have come to your room if you called me. Einir expressed with a friendly tone. It's all right, my friend. Felix stressed the term friend with a wide smile. Then, please come in and consider my room as yours. Einir didn't bother to read too much on Felix's tone as he invited him with open arms. Much appreciated. After Felix entered his room, he sat on a red wooden chair in the living room. Unlike Felix's room, this one was spacious and decorated glamorously. Still, everything was made out of dead wood and leaves. Do you want to drink anything? Einir tried to be as hospitable as possible. Just water. Felix requested with an easygoing smile. Right away. Einir went to his kitchen and filled up a wooden bowl from the water container. While he was gone, Felix hid 4 anti-surveillance devices around the room. He was quicker and more silent than a ghost. In a few moments, Einir returned to Felix and handed him the water bowl with a look similar to a dog, waiting for his next task. He is really sucking up to you. Asna giggled in amusement. Felix knew that the more he acted like this, the more dangerous the situation. So, I heard you were looking for me. Felix inquired. Yes, I was wondering if you are interested in hanging out in the evening. Einir smiled as he displayed 2 platinum holographic tickets. I have great tickets for a promotional game to Empyrean rank. I see, well, I am interested. Before Einir could feel thrilled by his response, Felix added, but, I am hoping that we can take another person with us. Oh sure, who is it? Einir asked with a curious tone, is it Selfie? No, you have never seen him, but you will recognize him instantly. Felix smiled charmingly before snapping his finger. The instant the sound resounded in Einir's mind, his pupils were enlarged at the sight of a void rift opening up behind Felix. Unfortunately for him, he stared into it akin to someone staring at the abyss. Only in this case, the abyss stared back at him as Nemo's demonic red eyes opened up right near the entrance. His pitch-black body was completely submerged in the Void Realm darkness, making it seem like the Void Realm was directly looking into Einir's soul. Thud. It wasn't a far-fetched analogy as Einir ended up falling into the ground immediately after his eyes came into contact with Nemo's. Just like Candace's reaction, he also curled up like a newborn baby and started shivering in pure horror. I must be dreaming, I must be dreaming, please wake up from this nightmare, please, please. Einir's mind was utterly consumed in fear and disbelief, having not a single clue what had just hit him. He just felt like he had committed a grave sin by staring into those eyes and that he would be killed in the most heinous possible way. This sort of feeling or sensation was extremely familiar with him as he had sensed it only once in his life, that was during his birth when he first saw the paragon of sins. No wonder he believed that this must be a dream as he knew that his creator was in a deep slumber. Nemo, that should be enough. Eeeeeeee. Nemo weakened his terrorizing effect and jumped on Felix's lap with a gleeful smile. He had his bully facing Felix, clearly asking for a belly rub as a reward. Felix chuckled and gave him what he wanted. Naturally, he didn't forget about Einir as he waited for him to regain his calm. He knew that he wouldn't dare run away or tell anyone about this since his entire mind and body were currently in possession of Nemo. If Felix wanted, he could even make him commit suicide, that's how deadly Nemo was to the Void race. Are you going to be weeping forever? Felix spoke with an irritated tone, get up already and sit on your chair. I don't have much time to waste on you. Too bad, Einir turned a deaf ear to Felix's words as his mind was still too shocked by the whole situation to bother dealing with Felix at the moment. Nemo. Eeeeeee. Understanding what he meant, Nemo glared at Einir, forcing him to stand up and sit on the chair against his will. It's him, it's really him, I actually schemed against my own god, I am dead, I am so dead. Einir started having difficulty breathing after he sensed Nemo's unique evil aura that belonged to no one but the paragon of sins. He had no idea why he looked like this and why was he allowing a human to treat him in this humiliating manner. All he knew was that his life wasn't in his hands anymore. Listen up, I will be giving you a series of questions and I hope that you answer all of them truthfully. Otherwise. Felix smiled gently as he picked Nemo's chubby cute paw and turned them into a fist. I will make you go through the most agonizing pain you have ever experienced in your life. I will tell you everything. Honestly, Felix didn't even need to use threats as Nemo's existence was enough for Einir to comply with anything he wanted. So, are you an imitator or a djinn? Felix asked. A djinn. I see. Felix rubbed his chin as he added, why have you taken this form? I took this elf's identity hoping to raise to the top of the 9 elvish realms and rule over them. Why elves? There is plenty of competition in other races. Felix understood that he implied his own race, knowing that unique void creatures were individualists who looked for their interest first. So, they wouldn't help each other if they knew that their end goal was the same. You knew that Lady Yggdrasil is the goddess of the elves and the true decision-maker, yet, you still decided to come here. Felix was confused about this. In the case of other races, most of their primogenitors had their hands off and weren't even known to the public. On the other hand, the 9 elvish realm had Lady Yggdrasil. Although most elves had no idea how she looked like, they believed that she was real and listened to all of her orders since they were literally living on her body and enjoying her gifts. Mother Tree might scare my peers, but I know that she wouldn't care about my true identity as long as I do my job correctly. Einir answered with a bit of confidence returning to his tone. Understandable. Felix nodded in agreement. If it wasn't for Selphie, Lady Yggdrasil would have definitely considered Einir to be one of the first runners to the throne even if he was a void creature. She was too old and experienced to worry about a little void creature. Even if he decided to act fresh, she could easily finish him off. Now, to the most important question. Felix narrowed his eyes coldly. Why are you targeting me all of a sudden? Einir gulped a mouthful in fear with his head lowered, not answering as instantly as before. This irritated Felix. Don't make me force it out of you. Trust me, it's not that I don't want to tell you, it's that I can't. Einir mentioned with a pitiful look, I have made an oath by using my god's name. If I broke it, I will have my law stripped from me and banished to the void realm for eternity. Is he being for real? Felix raised an eyebrow in surprise. I don't know if he really made the oath or not, but it's real. Candace confirmed with a stern tone, we never make oaths using the Paragon's name unless it was something significant between us. This is a problem then. Felix frowned. It was understandable that the war room would force anyone joining their cause to keep their mouths shut about their plans. Queen Ai's contracts were unreliable against them since unique void creatures were capable of splitting at least one wisp of their consciousness. Since none of them was trusting the other, the only way forward was to utilize their god's oath to bind them all for this cause. Felix had no idea about any of this. He just wanted the intel as well as keep Einir alive to serve as his dog. Unique void creatures like him could be used as one of the best deliverymen even if he had no other use for him. Can we get the intel out of him without caring about the penalty? Felix asked. That's if you managed to find him. Candace shook her head, the moment he breaks it, he will be sent into the depth of the void realm. It will be impossible to find him again. I see. Felix recognized that the only path forward was to break the oath while avoiding the penalty. Can Nimmo break it? Asna wondered, he is considered as the replacement, so swearing on the Paragon of Sins was the same as swearing on Nimmo, that's what I believe at least. It makes sense. Felix nodded in support, knowing that there weren't many options to consider. When it came to swearing oaths, it was almost impossible to find loopholes. Though, delivering such a complex idea to Nimmo was a challenge on its own. Felix had ended up spending more than 15 minutes, trying to make him understand that he wanted him to free Einir from the oath's binds. It was quite dangerous since Nimmo kept mistaking him for wanting to free Einir from his control wholly. Fortunately, Nimmo wasn't a complete retard and finally grasped what Felix desired. Are you done? Nimmo nodded gleefully while his red eyes turned dimmer. Do you feel anything different? Felix asked Einir. No. Einir answered with a fearful look, not liking where things were going. Alas, Felix wasn't concerned about his feelings one bit as he said coldly, I guess there is only one way to find out, start speaking now. Please, I would rather die than receive that eternal punishment. Einir begged. You really don't understand your position. Felix manifested a liquefied grey sphere and 10 spherical potions in his hands before threatening, I have the most potent truth inducement in one hand and 4 rank 5 truth serum in the other, you either speak while having your sanity or not. Felix knew that those two options would get the truth out of Einir, but it wouldn't be as clear as him talking voluntary. Knowing that those two options would mess up with his brain immensely, Einir could only grit his teeth and bite the bullet. I am trying to get close to you to learn more about your weaknesses and strengths. Stop stalling and tell me why. Einir closed his eyes tightly and continued on while his heart was beating out of his chest, to deal with you properly when we launch the universal war." The moment the last word came out of his lips, his entire body tensed up, expecting the banishment to happen. However, moments went by and nothing occurred. He opened his right eye and peeked around him just to see Felix's stunned expression. "I am fine." Einir mewed, "Maybe it didn't work because I haven't said much?" "That can't be. I provided key information." Before he could think too deeply about this, Felix came back to his senses and tightened his hand on Einir's collar. "What universal war are you talking about? Why the hell is it related to me?" Who could blame Felix for being this agitated? Nothing of such magnitude had ever occurred in his previous life. In fact, a universal war never occurred ever since the foundation of the alliance. It was called universal for a reason, as it would involve most races, whether they were willing to fight or not. It was like the world wars in Earth. Many countries kept getting pulled into the war by their allies even if they didn't want it. It wasn't the void race intentions. "We have been forced to commit to this war by those three demons. Otherwise, our identities would have been exposed." Einir's mouth ran smoothly now that he wasn't worried about the penalty. "Which three demons?" Felix asked while having a bad inkling in his heart. "It was the Darkin faction primogenitors." Einir confessed with a hateful tone, "I was living just fine until they called us and forced us to start a universal war in a decade minimum. They explicitly asked us to focus on the human race and cause a mass extinction." Einir wasn't dumb to expose that he also didn't have good intentions from this war. He knew that it was time to switch sides after getting caught red-handed like this. "I had a feeling it will be them," Thor remarked with a frigid tone. Unique void creatures feared no one in this universe but the primogenitors and those on the same level as them. So, this limited the choice to the Darkin faction members. "Don't tell me they are doing all of this to kill you." Asna raised an eyebrow in surprise. "What else?" Felix replied with a solemn tone, "It's not like they have this much spare time to do all of this without a goal." The moment he heard that they wanted the human race to get extinct, Felix knew that the war's main goal was to get rid of him once and for all. After all, he would never stand by and watch his race getting wiped out of the face of the universe. If he died in the chaos, it wouldn't track to them. "Did they ask you to target me?" "No, they asked us to keep an eye on you since you can turn the war balance with your ability to control void creatures. That was my mission." Einir answered while peeking at Nimmo, finally knowing the true source. As expected, they aren't dumb to go against Lord Cow's warning directly. Hormungandr nodded. "So, we can't take this to the Primogenitors Council and make a case against them?" Felix wondered. "No, they will side with them even if they figured out that their true intentions were you." Lady Sphinx shook her head, "As long as we don't have valid proof, we can't accuse them of anything. As for their plan to start a universal war," Thor continued on, "I am certain that at least 90% of primogenitors will either approve of it or not actively attempt to stop it." Felix could only take their words silently at the realization that primogenitors truly wanted only one thing in their desolate life: entertainment. As for caring about the deaths of their descendants, nothing would move their frigid hearts but a mass extinction. Felix took a deep breath to regain his cool and continued the interrogation. "How far have you prepared?" "Not much, we have just started." Einir gave extra details to gain some points. "We are still in the process of recruiting the key figures in the war room to establish some sort of hierarchy within the army." "That's good to hear." Felix already expected his answer since Einir made his move only recently. "Ask him about the key members." Candace said, "As long as we have their identities and locations, we can easily deal with them." Felix nodded in agreement and asked Einir. Just like a shameless rat, Einir didn't hesitate to give up on his allies' names and positions within the war room. When Felix heard that the most authoritative imitator in the universe was actually the current king of the sage race, he couldn't help but feel chills course on his spine. An imitator is actually one of the top 10 rulers and controlled the entire scroll market. Just the thought alone made him reconsider the true terror of the imitators and how many were there with such high-ranked positions. In his mind, half of the top echelon of the alliance might be infested with them. This is really too troublesome. Felix knitted his eyebrows. It will be too easy for a universal war to start if those high-ranked unique void creatures controlled the narrative from the shadows. Felix knew that a decade was a long period if it was utilized to build up enmity between races. We have void succubi, who controlled many high-leveled sex slaves. Jinns were capable of enticing the greed of those individuals as well, making them seek things they never had the balls to go for. Lastly, imitators could easily drive the built-up enmity and make sure that nothing would be settled peacefully. When things get too chaotic and tensed within the alliance, they could strike with their void army and deal the most damage. The worst part? Felix knew that warning everyone about the incoming war wouldn't achieve much. There is still a lot of time before it starts. If I warned everyone right now, I won't be taken too seriously. Felix thought to himself. The only ones you can influence are those with connection to you. Asna nodded. For example, Queen Allura would take Felix's warning seriously, so as the fairy matriarch. But the others? They might believe him for a while due to his reputation, but when time passes, and they see nothing happening, they would lower their guards again. Especially, when the Void Race could just as easily push away the date of the war when they realized that their plan was compromised. It wasn't hard to figure it out when they had hundreds of spies planted in the alliance. The best move is to act solo and handle this as discreetly as possible. Felix narrowed his eyes coldly. They might have a decade to start the war, but that's a decade for me as well to completely enslave all of them. Einir felt chills course on his spine after hearing so. He knew that Felix was more than capable of doing that when he had Nemo supporting him. **T, I need to stay on his good side at all times. Einir immediately understood why Candace was always with Felix. Listen well, I want you to make a list of all exposed identities in the war room as well as every single thing discussed in it. Felix ordered, make sure to behave normal to not raise any suspicion. Before Einir could comment, Felix threatened, your main consciousness will stay with me, so don't think for a second about betrayal. I know that you don't trust me, but you don't need to worry about me betraying you. Einir replied with a solemn tone, as long as my lord with you, I am forever your servant, and you can use me any way you desired. Felix already figured out that Einir would start to kiss up to him because of Nemo, still, he had to make his stance clear on the matter. To avoid any future confusion, Felix explained to him Nemo's real identity. This made Einir even more eager to earn his spot next to Candace, knowing that being one of the first subordinate to the Paragon of Sins would pay off immensely in the future. Candace was the only one irritated by this development. However, her anger was soon cleared off after she heard Felix's request, Candace, will you be responsible over him and any future unique void creature I take under me? Does it mean I can order them around? You can do whatever you want with them. Felix shrugged his shoulders, not caring too much about this. Unlike other unique void creatures, he had a long history with Candace, making her earn his trust. He, I will gladly do it. Candace giggled happily after recognizing that her position would always be higher than any other void creature. A couple of hours later, Felix could be seen sitting in his room while deep in thought. He was processing the detailed intel given to him by Einir. Currently, Arthur and the others are moving in a low-key manner to make sure that they hire only trustworthy unique void creatures. Felix murmured, it will be difficult to figure out the locations of every one of them. Felix already grilled Einir about their locations, but he had no clue. Felix only knew Arthur's location since he was simply too high-profile to hide like the others. For example, Miriam had many sex slaves in the Dwarven Empire, but no one truly knew her location since she could easily stay in the Void Realm and control her sex slaves from their dreams. Even her sex slaves' identities and numbers weren't known to the war room. If I want to go with this plan, I need them to expose their locations. It's doubtful they will do it this early. Felix was informed that the war room would start preparing to take control over the gelatinous cubes and world eaters after they gather enough numbers. That would be the best time to strike, as I will have most of them gathered in one place in the real world. Felix reasoned. Felix was confident that Nemo would be capable of enslaving all of them simultaneously. A god didn't have limitations on his creatures. So, what you will do now? Asna wondered while sipping coke in her bed. Nothing. Felix narrowed his eyes. The game is still in its infancy stage. If I got too agitated and made mistakes, I will end up making the situation even worse. Felix already made up his mind to act like nothing had happened. He would continue with his life as normal since he knew that the Darkin faction members and unique void creatures would have their eyes on him. Fortunately, he had Einir, who would keep feeding them whatever narrative Felix gave him. At the same time, he would be getting updated on the war room progress and further down his plan to strike them all. As for telling anyone about this, he completely erased that thought from his mind. If he was the only one with such information, he could easily control the narrative. What will you do when you enslave the Void Army? Candace inquired. She knew that if Felix managed to pull it off, he would be a true force to be reckoned with. After all, there was no one to rule the Void race ever since the Paragon of Sins was put into deep slumber. What do you think? Felix smiled coldly. They wanted a war for entertainment, I will give them a war they will never forget. Thor, Hormungandr and Fenrir all showed faint smiles after realizing Felix's end goal. Are you sure about this? Lady Sphinx asked calmly, knowing that the consequences would be too dire. They always attacked me, and now they even targeted my entire race. Felix replied with a tone filled with conviction, I will show them that the little guy can also strike back. I will show them. 1 month later. Felix could be seen sitting on his room's floor with his chest exposed in the open. He had just finished with integrating the last 2% of the Kraken's bloodline, finally hitting 99%. As for Einir in the war room, Felix did what he said and carried on with living his life like normal. Though, he received updates on the war preparation by Einir each week, making him further his master plan little by little. Without delay, Felix entered his consciousness space, expecting the Great Kraken to appear anytime soon. Is he here? Felix asked after joining everyone near the round table. Not yet. Lady Sphinx frowned, something is wrong. You can't sense his presence as well. Yes. Both Lady Sphinx and Fenrir were still alive in the real world, making their wisps of consciousness much more powerful than Thor and the others. If even them couldn't sense Kraken's presence, there was no need to mention the rest. What does this mean? Felix's happiness for meeting a new master was short-lived. He could feel that this wasn't good news. It means that either Kraken's wisp of consciousness wasn't awakened or the amount of bloodline you gathered isn't enough to create it in the first place. Lady Sphinx answered with a solemn tone. It can't be. Felix was left stunned, especially when he heard the second reason. He just couldn't believe it since this method had been reliable for 5 bloodlines. But at the same time, there was no way Kraken would remain dormant even after a complete wisp had been created. Now what? Asna wondered as she looked at everyone's baffled expressions. We can only wait. Thor sighed, knowing that nothing much could be done in this bizarre situation. And so, they waited and waited until their patience finally run dry. Did I just get scammed? Felix mewed with a deadpan expression. He chose water element because he believed that he would be getting its manipulation, but now? It looked like he was royally screwed over as the only thing he would be getting from this bloodline was a single ability. Seems like my second prediction was right. Lady Sphinx commentated. I guess so. Thor supported. The Kraken has the largest and strongest soul among all primogenitors due to his obsessive focus on his soul research. This made sense as everyone here knew that the strength of consciousness depends on the soul. They might seem similar but they really weren't. Soul was the container while the consciousness was the manifestation of it. Each soul could have many consciousnesses derived from it. Since the Kraken's soul was on another level than other primogenitors, he naturally had an entire different requirement to create one of his wisps. You will need much more than just 99% of his bloodline to awaken him. But how? Felix rubbed his eyelids in frustration. I will be dead meat if I went past 99%. Felix would never risk going past 99% integration, as the grave consequences of doing so were printed deep with his soul. He had seen many videos of daring retarded bloodliners ignoring the warnings and going for it. The only fate awaited them was their bodies melting on cellular level. You don't have to do it personally. Lady Sphinx looked at Asna and asked, are you capable of extracting soul threads? Of course. Asna nodded. Felix already knew that the primogenitor's bloodlines possessed bits of soul threads, which were passed over generation after generation. Those soul threads were the ones that make a wisp of consciousness when they become a whole. In the Kraken's case, clearly more were needed. Then, it's settled. Lady Sphinx explained, bring that girl Hina and anyone you have given the Kraken bloodline to. Asna will extract the soul threads and merge them with the ones currently in your body. I guess this is the only way forward. Felix nodded in understanding. Felix knew that Lady Sphinx chose to pick those bloodliners since Felix had given the Kraken bloodline to at least 5 people around the galaxy. He had sold them for money when he was strapped for cash and to also relieve some pressure on his back from all the interest his bloodlines had garnered. It was much better to group up those bloodliners and extract the soul threads at once than cultivate a new bloodliner from the start with the Kraken's bloodline. It would take far too long. After dealing with this emergency, Felix exited his soul consciousness and called Malak. He requested that she tracks down all the mythical water bloodliners and send them to the 9 elvish realms. Naturally, he would pay them handsomely for their cooperation. If they refused, Malak asked. You know what to do. Felix said indifferently before hanging up. As for Hina, he intended to take care of her on his own. Let's hope this work out. Felix wished that this method would help him wake up Kraken. Otherwise, he would really be losing out too much on this bloodline, especially when he had no idea about Kraken's ultimate ability. He had asked his masters, but even them didn't know much about it, as Kraken was quite a secretive individual. All they knew was that it wasn't size manipulation. It must be related to souls. Thor commentated that old geezer rarely shared anything about his soul research. Except for the advanced passive ability, one soul, many lives, Kraken refused to share the rest of his discoveries with his peers, especially about his ultimate ability. I do hope so. Felix said with an eager tone before closing his eyes, checking on the details of the Kraken's peak active ability. Hey? Are you serious? In less than a moment, Felix snapped his eyes open, showing a look filled with nothing but utter disbelief. The moment the information was available in Felix's memories, the tenants didn't wait for him to break out of his shock and ease their curiosity. All of them read the details from his memories, and they couldn't help but share Felix's expression. Soul remembrance, is that even possible? He actually reached this level in his soul research? That crazy madman! I am honestly speechless. Even Asna, the soul expert, was left with her mouth wide open, knowing that she hadn't reached such realm with all the gifts she was given. Who could blame them for such a reaction? Kraken's peak ability allowed him to store his memories and retain them within his soul. This might sound useless and easy to do, but that was far from the truth. Why? Because such an ability would allow the Kraken to retain his memories even after his death. In other words, he could actually transcend to the spirit realm, fully knowing what he was going into compared to everyone else. When I died, everything blacked out until the day I was awakened by Felix. Thor narrated, I have absolutely no clue if my main consciousness is currently residing in the spirit realm or in other place, since I remember nothing. Likewise. Same. The rest of the tenants, who experienced death, agreed with his statement. No wonder that bastard killed himself even when he seemed still too vigorous in his soul studies. Thor remarked, he must have decided to take things to the next level by visiting the spirit realm and exploring the dimension while still retaining his memories. He is really one of a kind. Lady Sphinx couldn't help but compliment him, knowing that obsessive researchers like hers would never stop until they reach their goal, even if it meant death. God knows what was the Kraken's end goal, but it was clearly related to the spirit realm. Do you think he is still there? Felix asked. I think only Lord Quetzalcoatl knows the answer. Lady Sphinx replied. The life primogenitor was the only one capable of entering and leaving the spirit realm as he pleased at the moment. Unlike the Kraken, he had created an ability that allowed him to hijack a dead soul and ride it to the spirit realm. Naturally, his life element must have played a considerable role in this. I don't know if he had met him in the spirit realm and was asked to keep it to himself, or they never actually met. Thor shrugged his shoulders. No one truly knows how big the spirit realm and what's in it. It was like a taboo to speak about the spirit realm as neither Lady Sphinx nor the talkative Lord Quetzalcoatl shared what they have seen in the spirit realm. Lady Sphinx's spiritual vision allowed her to glance a few seconds before getting kicked out. Still, it was enough to see some freaky stuff. Yet, she refused to share it with the group, telling them that they would understand if they were in her situation. Wait a second. This ability is astonishing and quite an impossible feat, to be honest. Felix gulped a mouthful after he was hit by a chilling realization, but, isn't it too useless for me at the moment? Felix expected some of them to defend Kraken's peak ability and start listing all the good stuff he could use it for. Alas, no one spoke. They just kept giving him a look filled with sympathy. Did I just get scammed again? Felix knew that he had no use for storing his memories within his soul. It would be helpful only if he died, but he had no plans to embrace death so soon. Well, it might be useless for you now, but it offers other benefits. Lady Sphinx shared, you will be having an ally when you enter the spirit realm. Lord Quetzalcoatl will merely give you a ride and ditch you there. That's a good point. Felix murmured in agreement. Felix recognized that the spirit realm would be one of his greatest challenges since it was a wholly different plane. Since he earned only one ticket from Lord Quetzalcoatl, he would be going with Isna alone. That's because Lord Quetzalcoatl could only bring wisps of consciousness with him, not entire souls. He wasn't told why exactly, but this entailed that he would be losing the support of his masters inside the spirit realm. Having Kraken be their guide was going to be extremely helpful. It wouldn't have been possible with him creating the soul remembrance. I guess this limited your options to etching one soul, many lives. Asna chuckled. That's a good thing. Felix smiled. I was going to be having trouble giving up on it if the ultimate was much better. Felix was immensely satisfied by such a remarkable passive. It helped him bypass all the hard work and struggle to learn it from the start like other primogenitors. Abilities related to the souls were 100 times much difficult than advanced elemental abilities, so, it could be considered as an ultimate too in his opinion. Still, the thought of going to participate in his first legit Empyrean game without an additional peak ability stung him a bit. Time went by in a jiffy as the day of the game reveal drew nearer and nearer. There were merely a few minutes left before Felix finally see what kind of game was chosen and the list of players in it. In Empyrean rank, there was no such thing as spinning the wheel. The low numbers of players didn't give them the luxury to have random games picked for them anymore. We should stop here, Felix expressed while glancing at his bracelet. Oh, the information about your game will be released soon. Selphie wondered as she paused her teaching of another greater spell. As she mentioned, the greater spells were much harder to learn and master, making Felix take all of this time just to master a couple of them. Yes, I need to start preparing. Felix nodded. Good luck. Selphie didn't know what else to say. She was already told that Felix had decided a game with an average rank of 300. She knew that such a rank was filled with no one but high authoritative figures around the universe. They were the elite of the elite, which meant that upcoming game would be one of the hardest challenges Felix ever go through. In addition, his runic mastery was still too garbage for such high-ranked games, so, having those spells was the same as having pebbles in his pocket. Still, Felix's didn't seem too fazed, he already built an unbreakable confidence in himself after all those victories. In his mind, this was nothing but another game with different opponents, nothing more, nothing less. After Felix took a shower, he sat in his bed and opened the Alliance holographic website. He went straight to the Empyrean tab, and he was faced with a giant advertisement for his own game. It had the type of the game, the details, the time, and even the players' names and profiles. Felix ignored it and went to read the version specified for the players. Naturally, he started with the game details first. It looked like this. / game platform, individual supremacy games platform. Game format, player vs environment. Game name, The Gods Raid. Participants number, 10. Strength allowed, human race system unlimited. Items allowed, nano-based items, symbiote-based items, potions, scrolls, and artifacts, limited to legendary. Prize pool, obsidian stone, staff of decadence, legendary artifact, fleece of hunger scroll, legendary rank, immunity grail, legendary artifact, revival coupon, grade 10. Rules of the game. 1. All the players will be teleported above a copied version of the Twilight Moon. 2. Players will be divided into 5 teams made out of 2 players each. 3. Virtual celestials will be spawned around the moon randomly. Those celestials will possess strength surpassing the realm of mortals. Strength on par with top 200 players. 4. There will be 3 kinds of spawned celestials: elemental celestials, mentalist celestials, barbarian celestials. 4. The player to slay a celestial will be rewarded with at least 100k points, his teammate would be getting half. Additionally, an extra point would be awarded based on the performance of the teams. 5. After all the celestials have been slayed, a virtual god will spawn in the center of the moon. He will have 5 times the strength of those celestials as well as their abilities. 6. The team to slay this god will be rewarded with 5 million points. 7. The game will last for 12 hours. 8. The team with the most points will be proclaimed as the winner. 9. The player with the most points will be proclaimed as the MVP. For more information, please open up your SG interface. Good luck to all participants // What an interesting concept. It's going to be challenging to deal with 3 sides. Felix held his chin thoughtfully as he read the details again. Felix knew that since the rules didn't ban teammates from sabotaging each other, then it was completely allowed. Still, this was easily solved with a queen contract, so it wasn't much of a problem. Celestials and gods, Asna snickered in ridicule at those 2 names being used irresponsibly over such little games. However, she kept her thoughts to herself and watched Felix continue his analysis of the game. It would be awesome to secure another legendary equipment. Felix smiled wryly. Too bad, their price is really out of this world. Felix had been hoarding game points from his recent victories since there wasn't anything that he really needed. Yet, the points he collected weren't enough to even cover 10% of the price for those legendaries. Looks like they are there merely for display. Candace commentated. Yep. Felix nodded, knowing that not a single legendary artifact had been won from any platform. They were there just to lure in players and show them the end rewards of the platform. In reality, no one was touching them. If it was so easy to get a legendary artifact, it wouldn't have been placed as the first reward in one of the Primogenitor's event games. I should at least make sure to secure the revival coupon. Felix switched his tone to a serious one as he eyed a white glowing piece of paper with the letter R in the middle. This was the ultimate coupon in the SG Alliance and in all platforms. Just from its name it was easy to understand why. Revival coupon, the only method to get revived upon death in the games. Felix remarked calmly. Felix had always heard of this coupon, but he had never seen it this close. That's because it was available only in Empyrean ranked games for the sake of offering another opportunity to save those elites in case of a misshape. It was first introduced when the previous queen of the fishermen ended up getting killed instantly by Elder Dragon, not giving her even the chance to use surrender coupon. If it was any other player, her death wouldn't have mattered much. Unfortunately, she was a queen and had a massive influence on her people, which ended up making them turn the alliance upside down after her death. To avoid such heavy affecting disasters from occurring again, the alliance decided to change the rules just a bit for the Empyreans. When they die now, they wouldn't get their consciousness extinguished by the queen instantly. Instead, she would check if they had revival coupon in their possession. If they had it, she would utilize it to negate the death penalty. Just like this, the universe wouldn't be impacted negatively by a single death. To avoid those Empyrean players abusing this revival system, the SG Alliance made the revival coupon to be costly as hell. Though, it didn't have expiration date like the other coupons, which was a bonus. I still need to collect a lot more to buy it. Felix murmured to himself, should I use my wish to get a loan and secure it at the end of the game? Now that an option for revival was available, there was no way Felix would just skim through it. If it meant putting himself in a game points deficient, then he would gladly go for it. No one should blame him for being this worried for his life since everything was unexpected in the Empyrean games. Speaking about the unexpected, the moment Felix scrolled below, his heart dropped to the bottom of his stomach instantly. They can't be f***ing serious. Felix cursed with a livid expression as he eyed his name being paired with another in the players' list. The player's name was Marquise Sebastian, Mananangle's second strongest champion and the right-hand man of the Vampire's Duchess Aline. He would be none other than Felix's partner in this game. Damn it, he is definitely going to sabotage me. Felix cursed with an irritated expression. He knew that the game didn't assign them to have partners for no reason. The Celestials would be damn strong for just one player to handle. Since he was already assigned Marquise Sebastian, he couldn't ally with anyone else but him. If he decided to ditch him and go solo, Marquise Sebastian would be getting 50k points free every time Felix managed to slay a Celestial. I doubt he will go so far to sabotage you under the public eyes. Asna reasoned lazily, he is the right hand of the Duchess, so he has a responsibility to maintain and protect his royal reputation. Asna did make plenty of sense in her assumption. This game included many authoritative figures with entire races on their shoulders. Even if they were champions as well, they would be finding it difficult to accept an order that would affect their reputation negatively. If it is someone else, I would have agreed. Felix scoffed, but, this is champion of that bastard, who didn't give 2 cents about his own face during the Primogenitors event. You think he will care about his champion's worries? True enough, Mananangle robbed Felix out of a win in the Primogenitors game under the eyes of his own peers, making him lose face immensely. Ever since then, his reputation was on the decline as most Primogenitors weren't treating him with the same respect as before. For someone who already lost this much, it wouldn't matter to him to add a little more of shame. Well, I guess you can only pray and brace for the worst. This is really off-putting. Felix sighed in exasperation before focusing back on the players' list. / Elder Forester, Heavenly Turtle Empyrean rank 334 / win rate 90.51%. Jagat, Royal Green Dragon Empyrean rank 321 / win rate 93.52%. Pagur, Shadowborn Empyrean rank 350 / win rate 90.2%. Unpaid Landlord, Human, Empyrean rank 476 / win rate 100%. Mipapo, Spaceworm Empyrean rank 311 / win rate 94.33%. Nightguard N8, Official Wasp N3 Empyrean rank 387 / win rate 93.87%. Gar, The Darkness Manifester, Gremlin Empyrean rank 348 / win rate 83.69%. Aquamia, Noble Fisherman Empyrean rank 348 / win rate 85.88%. Marquise Sebastian, Vampire Empyrean rank 366/win rate 89.45%. Daydreamer, Winged Elf, Empyrean rank 305/win rate 93.1%/. Those were the entire 10 players participating in this game, all of them were from different races, which were all ranked in the top 30 in the alliance. Unlike other games, where the champions had golden light shimmering on their names to distinguish them, each 2 players were colored the same. In the case of Felix, he was colored in blue with Marquis Sebastian, making him recognize that he was his partner. When Felix saw the rest of the partnerships, his eyelids couldn't but twitch. Almost all of them had perfect synergies with each other compared to his crappy situation. For example, Mipopo was partnered with Daydreamer, one used space element and the other was a highly gifted spellcaster with a firm grasp of gravity and nature runes. They could easily combine gravity with space to create absolute unscapable spatial traps. There was no need to mention the rest. At least your win streak looks oppressing compared to them. Asna giggled in amusement. One would expect that all the Empyrean players would have win rate close 100%, but it couldn't be further from the truth. After all, the Empyrean ranks system was wholly different from the ranks below it. It was mandatory to participate in games to maintain the fire. Since most of those players were playing these games for a very long time, it was normal to start picking up losses on the way, especially when they were contesting against powerful monsters just like them. In other words, players with 99% win rate would end up with merely 70% win rate after a decade of playing in this league. Felix knew that he could only try his best to keep this momentum going before finally hitting an unbreakable wall. While Felix was analyzing how to get the most of his shitty situation, the Darken faction members were holding a meeting with their 2 champions. We have been bestowed with a lifetime chance to finally make that brat has a taste of a humiliating defeat. Wendigo spoke with a tone filled with venom. I swear to God if you wasted it, I will skin you both alive. Gar and Marquis Sebastian felt goosebumps in their skin at his threat. They were certain that Wendigo wasn't talking crap to scare them off. Why can't you be more gentle? Mananangle smiled faintly as he eased up their champions. Don't get too stressed, no harm will befall you as long as you give it your best in taking down that punk. I will not disappoint you. Marquis Sebastian spoke for himself as he bowed respectfully towards his ancestor. When he was summoned here, he had a slim hope that his ancestor wouldn't go far enough to ask him to sabotage his own chance to win the game for the sake of their personal gratification. After all, the vampire royal family and the entire race was on the line. He knew that the public had no idea about the Champions Games, which would make them believe that Marquis Sebastian was doing all of this out of spite. For the second hand of the Duchess to be this petty wasn't a good representation at all. Unfortunately, he could see that Mananangle didn't care about any of this. If he dared not to make Felix lose the game as his priority, he would receive a much worse torture than just being skinned alive. I don't care which method you use, just make him lose this game. Saurus rubbed his tired eyelids. You are Empyreans, don't be as useless as the rest. Gar and Marquis Sebastian could only put a resolved looks to satisfy their ancestors, but deep down, none of them wanted any part of this shitty war between the Darken faction and the Asgardian faction. The older one gets, the more he cherished his life and the little things. Sadly, they had no say in this. 2 weeks later, 5 minutes before the start of the game, Felix could be seen maintaining the tradition of playing poker with his tenants for some good luck. He knew that he would be needing plenty of it in this game. In the past 2 weeks, he heard news that the rest of his opponents had gathered and trained with each other to further their chances of winning the game. Meanwhile, he hadn't spoken to Marquis Sebastian even once. As for the primogenitors, they already gathered a long while ago and placed their bets. Since 8 players were representing someone, there were quite plenty of primogenitors joining the fun. Unfortunately for Lady Sphinx, no one bet demoniacal monolith this time since she already robbed them clean of them. Alright, I will be heading out. Felix smiled faintly as he threw his useless cards in the table. Wish me luck. If your luck was as bad as in this poker game, you are really doomed. Asna joked. Can't you keep your mouth shut if you don't have anything nice to say? Felix's eyelids twitched as he looked at Asna, making faces at him. Not wanting to waste time on amusing her, Felix returned to the real world and logged in. After a short while of meditation, he was summoned to the game hall. The moment Felix opened his eyes, he saw that all the players were standing in pairs. It looked like they were comfortable with each other to speak freely. Meanwhile, Marquis Sebastian and him were like the black sheep in a herd. One was isolated at the far right corner and the other was in the left corner. None of them spoke or bothered to walk to the other. Seems like the rising star is having a quarrel with his partner. Aquamia chuckled as she eyed the intense stare down between Felix and Marquis Sebastian. Don't involve yourself with them. Pegur said expressionlessly, let them sabotage each other while we focus on ourselves. You don't have to tell me. Aquamia retorted, not liking to get lectured. Just because others didn't have the same level of enmity between them as Felix's team, they still weren't too friendly with each other. After all, they were gunning for the MVP in this game to help their ancestors and sponsors win the bets. They may not outright sabotage each other, but they would compete heavily to get the last hit on the Celestials to earn the most points. After a couple of minutes of soft chatter, the judge of this game had teleported above the players. Just from the snowy and a cold environment, everyone already assumed the judge's identity. Greeting everyone, my name is Ulfang from the Crystal Snowpack, and I am honored to be your judge in this lovely evening. A winter wolf greeted with a gentle tone as he looked at everyone. Unlike most winter wolves, he had a blue fur covering him from bottom to top. Some players greeted back, but the majority remained quiet. Knowing that almost everyone here had the ego of a star, Ulfang moved on to the explanation of the rules. Anyone here has a question? No one bothered to lift their hands as they merely kept eyeing Ulfang, waiting for him to send them to the stadium. Even if they had questions, none of them would lower their pride to ask it in this gathering of elites. Alright then, you have half an hour to finalize things between yourselves before you get summoned. Ulfang could only conclude the Q&A right away and teleport back to the stadium. After Ulfang left, the teams spread out and carried on with discussing their already prepared plans. Meanwhile, Felix and Marquis Sebastian were still eyeing each other without saying much. If I want to win this game, I really have to at least make sure that this F***er wouldn't hit me from the back in the first hours. Felix frowned as he walked in direction of Marquis Sebastian. This surprised him immensely, making him fix his posture, believing that Felix might be coming here to swear him off. When the rest of the players saw this, they paused their discussions and perked up their ears, wanting to pick up on their drama. Unfortunately, Felix spoke with Marquis Sebastian telepathically. I know that you have been ordered to sabotage me and my chances to win this game. Felix said calmly. And Marquis Sebastian agreed to his accusation causally. He wasn't that childish to act ignorant and snap off Felix when the situation was clear to everyone. I also know that you will be throwing your reputation down the drain by doing so and that you aren't too fond of that. Felix added. Does that matter to anything? Marquis Sebastian replied calmly. Felix understood the implication behind that sentence. It was like he was saying that his wants and desires had no place when an order were given to him by his ancestor. Felix sympathized with him a bit since no one would like to see everything that they had built get thrashed in a single moment against their will. Alas! So, I came here to propose a way beneficial for both of us. Felix remarked. Marquis Sebastian raised an eyebrow in interest, not expecting that his enemy would find a way to work with each other even in such circumstances. What do you have in mind? The game will last for 12 hours. Why don't we work together in the first couple of hours to defeat some Celestials? Then, we can drop off the teamwork with a big fight against each other. You are free to carry on with your mission after that. Felix suggested. Marquis Sebastian thought deeply about Felix's proposal. He understood that Felix's strategy would help him show everyone that the only reason he turned against Felix and started to sabotage him was due to their fight. This was much better on his public image than just straightaway doing the deed. As for Felix, he would be getting some peace of mind in the first couple of hours, farming as many points as possible before he would end up dealing with Marquis Sebastian and everyone else. It was a win-win situation for both parties. Deal. Marquis Sebastian nodded as he offered his hand for a handshake. Felix glanced it calmly and ignored it. Then, he manifested a holographic contract and handed it to him. Sign this. He turned around and left, not bothering to check whether Marquis Sebastian signed the contract or not. Marquis Sebastian wasn't offended by Felix's behavior as he would have done the same if put in the same situation. He signed the contract and lowered his head to continue his meditation. Marquis Sebastian recognized that his ancestor wouldn't be too pleased by his decision. But, he didn't care, knowing that this was the only option left where he could gain something out of this game. After all, if he sabotaged Felix from the very start, making him lose the game, his ancestor would be happy, but his reputation would never recover again unless he went into hiding for a very long period of time. On the other hand, this plan at least ensured that his reputation would stay intact if Felix lost. If he won, well, he would be taking the brunt of his ancestor's rage either ways. He is really playing with fire and bringing me with him. Gar thought with a displeased expression, not liking this development. Aquamia, Daydreamer, and the rest of the players were also not a fan of Felix's team making up. Still, they were sharp enough to realize that it must be a mere temporary arrangement. In their minds, there was just no way those two could work together for the entire duration when their factions were seeking each other's blood. Before long, the players were summoned to the stadium that was situated above the twilight moon. It was a beautiful natural creation as its color was deep red while being nearby a giant planet the size of Jupiter. Unfortunately, the peaceful silence of space was broken by thunderous yells and chants. Hawaii! Landlord! Landlord! Daydreamer! Landlord! For just 10 players, there was surely a crazy amount of attendance in this game as the entire space above the moon was filled. There were most likely at least 100 billion live spectators, an insane number compared to the previous games of Felix. It was quite normal for the Alliance to hype up this game and provide access to this many fans. After all, there were barely 10 Empyrean games each year, and they had to milk them dry every time. Naturally, Felix's fans were dominating the seating with their crazy numbers, making their chants and screams travel across the entire moon. This was only possible due to the moon being encased inside a transparent sphere that was hundreds of kilometers away from it. This transparent sphere was filled with oxygen and other air elements, helping the players to not fret about it, though, the gravity remained somewhat unaffected. Fortunately, it wasn't out of the control as it was close to the Earth's moon gravity. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to see some celestials get slain? Fang appeared out of nowhere near the players as she shouted passionately as well. The viewer's *T reaction was enough to send vibrations towards the nearby planet. Then, let's get right on it. Without wasting time with interview segment, Fang kicked off the game immediately. He knew that those bunch of elites wouldn't bother entertaining him with an interview, so, why waste time on it? 3, 2, 1. Rumble. The moment the countdown ended, Felix and Marquis Sebastian were teleported to a random area on the moon together. When Felix opened his eyes, the first thing he did was extend his infrared vision to the limit, knowing that he had only a few hours of peaceful hunting. I found one. Felix disclosed as he squinted his eyes at 100 meters Titan with the head of an eagle and the body of a scorpion. Just the size alone was enough to make him worthy of being called a celestial creature. Don't tell me you are talking about that one. Marquis Sebastian frowned after spotting the same terrifying creature. Yes. Then, you must be out of your own mind. Marquis Sebastian scolded, that should a barbarian celestial type, he must have a indestructible shell. Are you coming or not? Felix didn't even bother to listen to him as he took off rapidly in direction of the scorpion. Barbarian Celestial, Mentalist Celestial, or the Elemental Celestial, Felix wasn't planning on backing off against either of them even if it meant fighting them alone. The only reason Felix offered that contract was to have a peace of mind while fighting, not because he lacked confidence to fight the Celestials on his own. The faster Marquis Sebastian realized this, the better for him. King brat. Marquis Sebastian cursed in his mind as he chased after Felix, not wanting to be looked at as a coward by the viewers. Looks like Landlord and Marquis Sebastian have decided to target the venomous Scorpion Celestial. Is it a great choice or a bad one? Fang commentated as he focused the camera on the Scorpion Celestial. The viewers were able to figure things out for themselves as the Scorpion Celestial's states and abilities were all in display in a separate screen. All of his venomous attacks are useless against Felix, but the Marquis will struggle immensely. Enir said as he watched the game live next to his cousins. His greatest asset is still his unbreakable exoskeleton. Elnora added, unless they find his weakness and target it, they won't be able to slay it. All the Celestials had specific weaknesses to help the players deal with them appropriately. In the case of the Scorpion Celestial, the viewers knew that it was underneath his torso. Fortunately, the Scorpion Celestial was humongous, making it somewhat easy to access the bottom of his torso. It didn't take long before Felix and Marquis Sebastian arrived near the Scorpion Celestial. Instead of rushing him in a brain-dead fashion, they both hid themselves and started analyzing it. What do you have in mind, genius? Marquis Sebastian asked sarcastically after his advice to switch targets was ignored. Be quiet. Felix shushed him calmly and kept zooming in and out of every inch of the Scorpion Celestial, hoping to find some sort of weakness. He knew that the platform would never let the players go against such strong virtual creatures without offering them a way to succeed. As he assumed, he soon found out about the lower torso weakness. It was a small hole with thousands of dark soft spikes. Felix didn't know whether that was his POO hole or something else. In his eyes, if there's a hole there's a way. Listen up, you can either choose to act as an distraction or be the slayer. Felix said after sharing his findings with Marquis Sebastian. Marquis Sebastian thought about his answer deeply, knowing that both roles had their advantages and disadvantages. In the case of being the distractor, he would be in less danger since all he needed to do was focus on evading the Scorpion Celestial's attacks. If shit hit the fan, he could always retreat to safety. Though, he wouldn't be getting the last hit in this manner. On the other hand, the Slayer would have to go right below the Scorpion Celestial. Just like any intelligent creature, there was no way they would leave their weaknesses unprotected. So, if the Scorpion Celestial felt even an ounce of threat to his weakness, he could just as easily drop his attention on the other player and completely got batshit on the one targeting his weakness. Nevertheless, if everything went right, he would be earning 100k points instead of 50k. But, why was I given the choice in the first place? Marquis Sebastian frowned as he peeked at Felix from the corner of his eyes. In his mind, he believed that Felix would take every chance to gain as many points as possible before he switched up on him, even if it meant taking big risks. Does he know something, and he isn't sharing, or is he just playing reverse psychology to force me to be the distractor? The more Marquis Sebastian thought about it, the deeper he dug himself. Unfortunately for him, Felix didn't have unlimited patience. Make your mind quickly before I make it for you. Felix said with an irritated tone. Don't rush me, kid. Marquis Sebastian replied coldly. They might be partners in the same game, but Marquis Sebastian still treated Felix as mere child. It was normal since he was alive for over half the period of the Alliance's foundation. He could be considered as the oldest in this game next to Elder Forrester, the Heavenly Turtle. As they say, the older you get, the fewer risks you take. Felix scoffed before standing up. I will be attacking, you act as a distraction. Like hell you will. Marquis Sebastian denied his proposal immediately before standing up as well. He stopped thinking too much about this and just picked the best option for him at the moment. Obviously, it was to keep Felix from getting too many points and win the game. Make sure to distract him properly. Not leaving Felix the time to reject, Marquis Sebastian swiftly summoned his bat wings and flew around the Scorpion Celestial, planning to make a move from the back. Felix showed a hidden cunning glint in his eyes before switching back to his serious expression. The ones who picked up that sudden switch knew that Felix was up to no good. Whoosh! After Felix saw that Marquis Sebastian had taken his position, he cracked his knuckles and jumped in the open right in front of the Scorpion Celestial. Although there were a couple of kilometers between them, Felix still appeared like a rice grain in front of the Scorpion Celestial. Still, not an ounce of fear was seen in his indifferent eyes. Because of the Scorpion Celestial had an eagle head, its eyes were extremely sharp, this made it spot Felix even through the size difference. Cray-a-a-a. It squawked noisily and charged towards Felix with murderous red eyes. Its towering thick 8 black legs kept smashing on the ground, leaving deep craters with each step. The viewers held their breaths tightly at the sight of Felix standing with a composed expression while being rushed by this godly entity. Just the sight of it had already installed fear in their hearts, they didn't dare to imagine how it would have been like in Felix's position. Why isn't he moving? Marquis Sebastian was left confused by Felix's inactivity. He thought that he would be running away or at least using his defensive abilities to protect himself and buy him some time to sneak up. But Felix held his ground even when the Scorpion Celestial was about to crush him with merely the weight of one of his giant pincers. Boom! The sharp pincer smashed the ground, raising a giant cloud dust in place of Felix. Before the viewers could react, Felix dashed out of the dust cloud akin to a spear. He wasn't running in the opposite direction, but actually sprinting on top of the Scorpion Celestial's pincer. Cray-a-a. The Scorpion Celestial started waving his pincer left and right, trying to throw Felix away. Too bad, Felix was utilizing his electromagnetic discharges to make his feet glued on the exoskeleton's smooth surface. In less than a second, Felix already made it on top of the eagle's head. It possessed a glowing green beak and murderous red eyes, but no fur at all. It was also covered entirely with the exoskeleton, making it a protected body part. Cray-a-a. Boom boom. The scorpion used both of its pincers to smash its head, not caring about damaging itself in the process of kicking off Felix. Too bad, Felix was just too nimble. When those attacks failed, the Scorpion Celestial used its deadliest weapon, the stinger. It was extremely long as it possessed the same length of the body, making it able to reach everywhere around the scorpion. Instead of using it to pierce Felix, the Scorpion Celestial brought it near its head and spew a gooey dark green liquid. Felix glanced at the incoming shower of the venomous liquid and manifested an umbrella made out of white adamantine. The poison might not affect him, but he knew that it could be acidic and end up damaging his suit majorly. When are you planning to attack? Felix asked calmly as he kept annoying the Scorpion Celestial, making it place its entire focus on him. Right now. Marquis Sebastian replied as he flew as close as possible to the ground while covering himself in a veil made out of blood. Because of the environment, he ended up being camouflaged perfectly. As expected, the Scorpion Celestial hadn't noticed him when he sneaked between his legs and traveled under his massive torso. I have arrived. Marquis Sebastian updated as he eyed the spiky hole. It was quite creepy alright as it looked like the inside of a space worm's mouth. Kill it. You don't have to say it. Marquis Sebastian narrowed his eyes at the hole while manifesting a gigantic spear made out of blood. What's peculiar about it was its color as it was turning darker and darker. Marquis Sebastian is using his killer move from the get-go. A smart decision. Fang explained passionately, he is the only blood elementalist, who is capable of turning his blood into an infestation hive of millions of deadly viruses. It might sound easy to pull off, but every blood elementalist knew that they would never pull it off in their lifetimes as they didn't have the dedication for it. That's because the blood elementalist was required to infect himself with the virus first and make his blood fight against it and win the war without any use of medication. Only then could he keep the virus inhabited in his blood and utilize it in his own blood abilities. While blood elementalists could do this for a virus, 2 viruses, or even 10. No one could reach Marquis Sebastian's number as this was his specialty. Even Duchess Aline wasn't a match to him in this department. "Kill it for me, my little darlings," Marquis Sebastian remarked with a faint cold smile as he shot the dark blood arrow inside the spiky hole. Cray-a-a-a. The moment the scorpion celestial sensed a cold sensation in its po-po hole, it reacted violently by folding its legs, trying to squash anything below it. Crap! Marquis Sebastian's elegant face was no more as he flew at the top of his speed, knowing that he wouldn't get out of this in one piece if the scorpion celestial's torso landed on him. Food. Tremors spread throughout tens of kilometers on the moon after the scorpion fell on the ground. The viewers tried their best to find Marquis Sebastian, but alas, the dust cloud blocked their visions. Just as Ulfang was going to highlight Marquis Sebastian's body, he was seen bursting out of the dust cloud while being protected inside a white crystallized sphere. Felix was controlling the crystallized sphere with his finger while sitting on top of the scorpion celestial's beak. Did Felix just save a vampire? Elnora exclaimed with a tone filled with disbelief. Even the Darkin faction members were taken back, believing that Felix should take every single opportunity to eliminate Marquis Sebastian without breaking the contract terms. "I didn't need your help," Marquis Sebastian remarked with an irritated tone while sitting inside the white adamantine sphere. "I know." Felix smirked faintly while bringing the sphere towards him. "What do you mean by that?" Marquis Sebastian suddenly felt a jolt on his spine after seeing Felix's smirk. "You will find out soon." Felix chuckled as he jumped on top of his sphere and controlled it to pull away from the scorpion celestial, who started thrashing around like he was having millions of rats eating him from within. "It can't be, you can't be serious, you are seeking death like this." With more time spent inside the crystal sphere, the more his assumption of his Felix's plan become clearer. He finally realized that Felix had planned all along to trap him inside this crystallized sphere instead of rescuing him. Even though he was the second strongest vampire, he recognized that it wouldn't be possible to break through the thick hard shell of white adamantine. If Marquis Sebastian knew from the very start that Felix had ill intentions with his protection attempt, he would have rather forced himself to switch directions and end up getting smashed by the scorpion celestial. He would be heavily wounded all right, but at least, he wouldn't be trapped like this. "Maybe, but my mind will be at ease to play this game without needing to watch over my back," Felix replied calmly. "You crazy idiot, you have just done me a great favor." Marquis Sebastian cooled down in a second after recognizing that his situation wasn't so bad after all. He might be trapped, but he knew that Felix would struggle immensely against other players and Celestials on his own. His mission was to make Felix lose. So, if he was going to do it by himself without involving Marquis Sebastian and his reputation, he wouldn't mind chilling inside the crystal sphere. "Why did you make your move this early?" Marquis Sebastian couldn't help but ask. "Would you have lowered your guard against me if it was after an hour or two?" Felix replied. No, Marquis Sebastian realized that Felix was extremely intelligent to make his move in the first few minutes of the game. He took advantage of Marquis Sebastian's belief that the most rational choice to make was take advantage of those hours to farm as many points as possible. So, he saw the crystallized sphere as nothing but a way to save him and keep a helpful asset like him for the next couple of hours. At least, that's what he would have done. Unfortunately, Felix's thought process was always shrewd and rarely followed the rational sense. Cray. While they were having a civilized discussion, the scorpion celestial was beginning to spew greenish blood through his 7 orifices while letting out blood-chilling squeaks. Marquis Sebastian's millions of viruses were like guided missiles, hitting only the most important organs instead of spreading through the entire bloodstream and delaying the inevitable. Although the scorpion celestial possessed poison immunity, he's still going down from Marquis Sebastian's dreadful viruses. Fang snorted softly, not liking to glorify Marquis Sebastian too much. But, this was his job as an MC, and he had to keep politics and their racial swore out of it. How does that even work? Moana wondered. While most viruses produce microbial toxins to cause their harmful effects on their hosts, there are many others with different abilities of harming their hosts. Marquis Sebastian is known to possess almost every type of them. Enir enlightened, taking every advantage to get closer with his cousins. He is really a dangerous individual. Though, why isn't Felix letting him out? Kerwin titled her head in confusion. It was only natural for the viewers to start figuring out that something abnormal was going on between those two. It's been more than half a minute and Felix still sat on top of the crystallized sphere with a nonchalant expression like his partner wasn't still trapped inside. The thing that weirded out everyone was Marquis Sebastian chilling inside the sphere as well. Only the primogenitors managed to understand what was going on the moment Felix sat on the sphere. Here I thought that your vampy boy will be the first to make a move. Erebus chuckled. I can't believe he got himself caught in the first minutes of the game. Siren also rubbed it in Mananangle's face, knowing how shifty you are, that human kid didn't want to take any chances. Mananangle didn't like the jabs thrown at him, but he remained silent. He knew that his credibility was already affected heavily in the primogenitor's circle and there was no point in trying to save it with lies. Though, he was indeed pissed off at his champion for falling into Felix's scheme for the sake of his useless reputation. He knew that if he didn't sign the contract, he would have kept his guard up to the maximum against Felix from the very start. Since Felix wasn't harming Marquis Sebastian either mentally or physically, the Queen couldn't punish him for trapping him inside the crystal sphere. At least the contract terms didn't specify this much. As long as that prick loses, nothing else matters. Mananangle narrowed his eyes at Felix. The only reason he wasn't going batshare*T at his champion was his firm belief that Felix would find it difficult to stay competitive in this game while babysitting his champion. Cray. Boom. With one last agonizing squeak, the scorpion celestial finally fell into the ground, closing its bloody eyes shut for good. Congratulations, you have successfully earned 50k points for assisting in slaying the venomous scorpion celestial. Felix received this notification the moment the scorpion's death was confirmed. Meanwhile, Marquis Sebastian received 100k. Yet, he didn't seem too interested in it. Now, let's chill together for the next 4 hours. Felix smiled at Marquis Sebastian as he watched the scorpion celestial turn into light particles. What do you mean? Marquis Sebastian frowned. Aren't you going to hunt? Nope. Felix shook his head. Marquis Sebastian's eyes widened suddenly after he was hit with the most horrific realization. Don't tell me, hey, you are really something else. He always assumed that Felix would be taking him around while hunting down other players and celestials. But, he overlooked one crucial truth. The only reason Felix wasn't attempting to kill now was due to the contract's constraints. Those constraints would be broken off in 4 hours at best. Then, Felix would be free to get rid of him completely and go on his hunting journey without having such a giant burden on his shoulders. You would be losing 4 crucial hours like this. Marquis Sebastian smiled coldly. I know that you think yourself tough after getting promoted this quick, but boy, you have no idea how dangerous and strong real Empyrean players are. If you think that you can give them 4 hours head start and still win this alone, then you must be truly delusional. Well, I have got you trapped, didn't I? Felix smiled kindly, letting him know that his effort to make him doubt his confidence wasn't going to work. Sure, Felix knew that losing 4 hours was going to make this more challenging than it already was. But he would rather seek victory in this manner than deal with a saboteur in his own team. Minutes went then hours. Felix was still keeping Marquis Sebastian as his hostage. By now, the viewers were convinced that those two either had a fall off or Felix was too proud to accept partnering with a vampire. The latter reason had Felix getting booed by most viewers besides his fans, thinking that Felix was being a d**head for ruining his own team chances over nothing. This situation was precisely what Marquis Sebastian feared would happen to him, as his reputation and royal family were on the line. Though, in the case of Felix, he could have cared less if even the humans booed him. I don't understand what landlord is thinking, but if he still wants to have a shot at winning this game, he better act up and soon. Fang commentated as he displayed the scores of the other 4 teams and their current fights. The ranking appeared like this. /1, Mipapo/Daydreamers team, 900k points. 2, Jagat/Elder Foresters team, 750k points. 3, Fagur/Aquamia's team, 750k points. 4, Nightguard N8/Gars team, 600k points. 5, Unpaid Landlord/Marquis Sebastian's team, 150k points. It was only natural that those teams would put such a considerable lead between them and Felix while he was chilling with Marquis Sebastian. Still, Felix didn't expect that it would be by this much. Regretting your decision yet? Marquis Sebastian scoffed after seeing Felix frown. He could tell that he was looking at the ranking list. Felix's ignored him. There is still 1 hour left. Marquis Sebastian continued on his mockery. I bet that all of them would be hitting 1,000,000 points soon, unless you hunted them all and eliminated them. You won't catch up even if you gave it 120%. Felix knew that Marquis Sebastian wasn't talking out of his ass. Damn, no matter how much I overestimated them, I still didn't think they will be at this level. Felix thought to himself with a solemn expression, will 10 hours really be enough? Even Felix started to doubt if he could pull this off, which rarely happened. Still, he kept his cool and continued waiting patiently for the contract's seals to cut off. His team's tragic score naturally had made the other teams pay attention to them. Looks like that brat is getting eliminated sooner than I anticipated. Elder Forester spoke composedly as he slid on the moon's surface, following Jagat. That's a shame, I wanted to give a piece of my mind. Jagat replied with a frigid tone. It was a natural reaction as he was one of the Green Clan's officials. He still couldn't forget everything that Felix had done to them when he visited their galaxy. He stole the ceremony from them, he killed their favorite youngster, and even put most of the dragons in a debt that would last for many years to come. If this wasn't a champion game and he had a teammate, he would have already traveled to him and showed him the difference between a royal official dragon and the rest. Be faster, we need to catch up to that worm and the sissy. Speaking about them, Mipapo and Daydreamer were currently the most dominating force in this game due to their perfect elemental synergy. They dealt with all Celestials in the same manner. Mipapo opened up a spatial rift near the Celestials while Daydreamer cast an omnipotent gravity spell that ended up dragging those Celestials within the spatial rift against their will. When they get inside, Mipapo could easily take care of them. If it were any other team, this would have created a big problem since Mipapo was getting most of the points. But, neither of them cared that much about being first to parodize their teamwork and their current dominance. That's because they were the only non-champion players in this game. One was a winged elf and the other was a space worm, so, as long as they secure the team win in such a difficult game, both of them would be pleased. After another long and arduous hour, Felix had finally heard Queen's sweet monotonous voice announce, "Your contract with Marquis Sebastian is voided." Marquis Sebastian heard it at the same time, making him face Felix with a solemn expression. "Make it quick for both of us and just surrender," Felix said coldly. "No." Before Marquis Sebastian could even finish his sentence, Felix started shrinking the crystal sphere on Marquis Sebastian. "What the hell? Has Landlord finally lost it or what?" Fang shouted with a stunned look as he watched the crystal sphere getting smaller and smaller. Although the experience was frightening, Marquis Sebastian didn't even bat an eye to the closing walls. He knew that escaping was hopeless, so why show a humiliating reaction by banging on the walls and cursing Felix? As for dying? Well, that wasn't happening anytime soon. Boy, I really have to thank you. Marquise Sebastian smiled. I was between a rock and a hard place, you saved me from it without me putting any effort. It was quite true, if Marquise Sebastian was given a choice, he would have never participated in this game. He had everything to lose and nothing to gain. Felix remained quiet and watched him disintegrated into light particles after finally using the surrender coupon to avoid getting turned into a mush. Phew, it's like removing a giant mountain off my back. Felix couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief after Marquise Sebastian was eliminated. No one could understand how deadly to have a partner holding a knife near your back while you were focused completely on the game. Any small mishap could be turned into a fatal scenario because of a single backstab. Now that Felix was all alone, he could finally start playing the game in a comfortable manner. I really don't understand what's going on between those two, but now that Marquise Sebastian is gone, Landlord's chances to catch up have become much slimmer. Fang shook his head. I didn't think I would say this, but I believe this will be Landlord's first defeat. Boo! Boo! Felix's fans immediately rained on him with boos and curses for talking shit about their idol. But deep down, most of them started getting antsy at Felix's chances to win this. The only good news is that he will be getting the complete 150k points after his partner has been eliminated. This was the reason Felix never was interested in last hitting the Scorpion Celestial. He already knew that the points would be returning to him when he gets rid of Marquise Sebastian. Let's get this started. Without an ounce of hesitation, Felix immediately took off towards a random direction. 8 hours left in the clock, the first team had 6 Celestials slain compared to him. Unfortunately, the Celestials were being spawned in a random manner around the moon. Plus, the numbers were abysmal. In the case of the Scorpion Celestial, he merely got lucky and teleported near him. In reality, the other teams had struggled more to find the Celestials in those 4 hours than in slaying them. In other words, it all depended on luck if Felix could find one anytime soon. Fortunately, it looked like the goddess of luck had finally smiled at him after giving him the worst possible F***ing start in a game. Is that a real Celestial? Felix frowned as he stared at Humaniad infrared aura, that was hovering above the ground while sitting in a lotus position. What weirded Felix the most was actually the size, as it was smaller than him. If he didn't know every player's height and shape in this game, he would have honestly thought that it was one of them. When Felix got too close, he was able to drop his infrared vision and zoom in on the Celestial. The hell? Is that a monkey monk? Felix's pupils were enlarged in disbelief at the sight of a brown-furred monkey, wearing a monk outfit and having a long wooden stick placed on his lap. He had his eyes closed shut as he murmured some sort of mantra while playing with beads in his fingers. Like he had sensed someone spying on him, the monkey opened his eyes slowly and looked directly into Felix's eyes, making him flinch a bit. This will be challenging, all right. Felix knew instantly that the monkey wasn't going to be an easy target, especially when he had no backup anymore. I can't believe that Landlord is going to face the Monkey King. Fang shouted as he displayed the statistics of the Monkey King. When the viewers read them, they couldn't help but suck a deep breath in shock. Crap! Felix will suffer big time. Baron exclaimed. He is really too unlucky to land against his perfect counter. Will he be all right? Kerwin added with a worried tone. He can always run away. Having no clue that his fans were shouting at him to retreat, Felix already kicked off his assault. He started by manifesting tens of crystallized soldiers with assault rifles. He created a ditch above the ground with his gemstone manipulation, allowing his soldiers to have a perfect place to fire as well as remain protected. Then, he took out 2 wisps of consciousness and installed them into 2 soldiers, freeing him of controlling all these railgun rings on his own. Looks like Landlord wants to conclude this as safe as possible. Fang commentated as he watched Felix join the assault team by picking up his infamous sniper rifle. Will it work though? Fang shook his head. Fire! Boom boom boom. Not giving anyone's time to react, Felix and his soldiers showered the Monkey King with a sea of bullets. The Monkey King didn't even bother to budge as he watched those bullets either fly past his face or land on his body. When the noise went away and the dust settled, Felix couldn't help but knit his eyebrows at the sight of the Monkey King still sitting in a lotus posture. Besides his ripped-apart clothes, not a single bullet left a scratch on him. Felix instantly knew why, as his ripped clothes had exposed a chiseled golden torso. Even his limbs were toned out and dignified with a golden skin. This made him resemble a statue made out of gold. A metal elementalist. Felix thought to himself as he watched the Monkey King stand up calmly while having the wooden pole placed on his shoulder. He knew that as a metal elementalist, the Monkey King should be using Strucrace metal or another type that was extremely tough to break apart. So, he ordered his soldiers to keep pressuring the Monkey King while he condensed electricity to create an electrical storm bullet. Felix believed that his skin should be highly conductive to electricity, making it a weakness. Boom boom. The Monkey King remained in his place, but this time, he was more active in his defense as he kept using his wooden pole to swat most of the bullets away. The wooden pole didn't get destroyed in the process due to being also covered by the same golden metal. When Felix saw that the Monkey King's reaction speed was actually high enough to block his hypersonic bullets, he was extremely taken back. The hell? Are elemental celestials this strong even physically? Felix believed that only barbarian celestials should possess this kind of reaction speed since they rely mostly on their physical strength. In truth, if it wasn't for the Scorpion Celestial's humongous size and Marquis Sebastian's killer move on a cellular level, it would have been extremely difficult to take him down. I have to aim at his feet. Felix swiftly came to the best decision and aimed at ground near Monkey King, knowing that his electrical storm bullet's real damage was caused by the aftermath, not the first contact. If only he knew. Fang couldn't help but show a sympathetic expression for Felix as he watched him fire the electrical storm bullet. SZLZLZLZLZLZ. In the blink of an eye, the bullet disappeared and what was left behind it was a destructive storm of electricity that consumed kilometers of distance around the Monkey King. It was so bright, no one managed to see the Monkey King's fate after being hit directly by such a calamitous ability. However, everyone but Felix knew that the Monkey King would emerge without an injury from the storm. That's precisely what he did as the Monkey King shoved his now metallic pole inside the ground and jumped on top of it. Then, he enlarged the size of the pole somehow and made it bent to the back by putting all of his weight on the top. When enough tension was created, the Monkey King removed the weight, causing him to get launched into a missile in direction of Felix. He was engulfed in electricity, making him pretty noticeable in the air. Felix could only watch him falling in his direction with a mouth agape, not daring to believe his unluckiness. Mother Sir is also a lightning elementalist. Felix cursed angrily as he prepared himself to receive the retaliation of the Celestial. He knew that the force within his electrical storm was enough to break even metal apart. So, for the Monkey King to escape from the storm without even getting paralyzed, it only meant that he possessed lightning immunity. Whoosh! The instant the Monkey King was close to Felix, he merged his hand with his golden pole and enlarged its size until it resembled a cylinder-smooth skyscraper. Then, he smashed the area where Felix and his soldiers were camping. Boom! Besides the moon dust raising and rubble being sent everywhere, nothing else resulted from this attack. Landlord also has one of the best defenses in the universe. Fang commentated passionately as he watched the giant golden pole fail to break through a newly created crystal dome. The force was enough to push the dome a few meters into the ground, but that's all it did. Whoosh! The Monkey King lowered the size of his golden pole while sliding on it in a cool manner. By the time he was about to reach the crystal dome, the pole was already tucked nicely underneath his armpit. He looked at Felix indifferently through the crystal dome while standing on it, seeming like he was daring him to step outside. This is why you need another Empyrean as a partner. Fang asserted. Those Celestials aren't to be joked about since they are created with the basis of giving even Empyreans a real challenge. No one doubted him as they had watched the celestial fights of other teams. The only ones who made it seem easy were Daydreamer and Mipapo. But that's only due to their abuse of their cranky synergy. The others struggled with each fight even as duos. Two elements countering me and even a legendary artifact as a weapon, my unlucky streak continues, I guess. Felix stared directly into the Monkey King's soulless eyes, knowing that if he wanted to win this, he must dirty his hands. Deconstruction Waterspout. Without delay, Felix manifested a towering vermilion waterspout after removing his crystal dome. The Monkey King ended up losing his footing and get thrown into the air by the waterspout. Before he could regain his balance, Felix appeared near him akin to a ghost and kicked in the back. Whoosh! The Monkey King got launched outside the waterspout like he just got smashed by a sledgehammer. Though, he didn't seem like he got injured as his expression remained indifferent. You ain't going nowhere. Felix extended his palm in his direction, commanding a newly created vermilion water tentacle to catch him midair. Splosh! The Monkey King defended himself by blasting the water tentacle into little droplets just as it was about to touch him. He already sensed the danger of the water as his metallic skin was getting eaten by it. Whoosh whoosh! Unfortunately, 10 more emerged from the waterspout and came at him from every single direction. SZLZLZLZLZLZ. Abruptly, a powerful burst of electricity emerged from the Monkey King and caused any tentacle to get blown out the moment they touch his field. For Felix and the viewers, this sight was quite peculiar as they weren't used to seeing lightning abilities being used against him. Whoosh! Just like a mindless machine, the Monkey King increased the size of his golden pole and swung it at the waterspout. Splosh! The waterspout got separated into half for a split second before blowing up into a chaotic mess, losing its tornado-like shape instantly. This caused Felix to start falling into the ground as he had lost the uplift. Still, he easily recovered by having a water tentacle catch him. It was created from the chaotic portions of water in the ground. As anticipated. Landlord is struggling. Fang commentated excitedly. Thud. The moment Felix was dropped on the ground, the Monkey King joined him by landing akin to a meteor. Before the noise could even echo twice, he was already sprinting in direction of Felix while dragging the golden pole behind him. It was engulfed in electricity, creating a truly deadly combination. Unless I weaken him, I ain't winning this anytime soon. Felix swiftly beamed his crescent battleaxe and covered it in purplish electricity as well. This was the first time he was going to use the energy-draining sacred attribute since he always abused his soul-burning attribute. But in this case, Felix was smart enough to know that his soul-burning attribute was useless against those celestials since they were operated by Ace. In other words, they had no souls whatsoever to burn. How is Landlord keep changing the colors of his lightning as he wished? Fang remarked in surprise as he watched Felix charge towards the Monkey King while leaving behind him a long trail of purplish lightning arcs. The Monkey King tightened his grasp on the golden pole and swung it as hard as he could at Felix's head. Felix blocked the strike with the surface of his axe, knowing that the blade would lose out against the bluntness of the golden pole. After all, they were both legendary artifacts. Sealing. SZLZLZLZLZ. The instant the two weapons clashed, an explosion of electricity occurred, causing both to get assaulted by them. However, while Felix came out of the clash all right, the Monkey King had a slight change of expression after sensing that his mental energy, elemental energy, and his physical energy was reduced just a little. Whoosh! Felix didn't let him think for a second about this as he rushed him again and showered him with a barrage of strikes, forcing the Monkey King to block them with his metal pole. Each time he did so, the purplish electricity would be transmitted straight into his body because he was connected with it. He might be immune to electricity, but nothing could defend him against the energy-draining sacred attribute. Boom! When the Monkey King began to feel weaker and weaker with each clash against Felix, he started to pull away under the stunned eyes of the viewers. Everyone could see that somehow Felix was dominating him, which shouldn't have happened since they were merely smashing their weapons around. What the hell is going on? Why is the Monkey King is getting pushed around? Fang frowned. I thought he will at least hold down Landlord for about an hour if not more. Unbeknownst to them, the Monkey King was getting sapped dry out of everything, making it harder and harder for him to even lift his golden pole. The worst part, he couldn't even escape since Felix was just as fast as him, he was literally being forced to keep clashing against Felix. However, just as Felix assumed that everything would keep going this smoothly, the Monkey King finally decided to force Felix by any means possible. His eyes suddenly turned purple and was followed by the rest of his body, even the pole became purple, making Felix frown as he had recognized what type of metal was being used. Damn it, it's the nether steel. Felix pulled away on his own, knowing that his strategy was doomed to fail against the nether steel. In fact, it would do more harm than good, since the nether steel was also capable of absorbing the heat produced from electricity and turn it into kinetic energy. When Fang saw this, he finally managed to connect the dots about what's truly was going on. To make sure, he highlighted the Monkey King statistics again, making him and the viewers gasp audibly. He is sucking all of his energies. Elnora stated with a shocked tone as she eyed the Monkey King's energy bars all being on the low side. No wonder he switched to the nether steel metal. Fang added loudly. The sharp viewers realized that his choice wasn't completely beneficial to him since he wouldn't be able to use lightning anymore. The Monkey King must have left this choice as the last countermeasure for this sole reason. Unfortunately, it didn't change much in his situation. I have 2 more elements, my friend. Felix smirked as he coated his battleaxe with true poison that possessed the energy-draining attribute as well. To make it even harder for the Monkey King, he turned his hair into many tentacles and coated them too. Cling! 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 While their weapons clashed together, Felix used his tentacles to sneak attacks from any opening he saw. It didn't matter that they weren't strong enough to break through his nether steel skin. As long as the poison touched his skin, the effect would be applied. That's because the Monkey King wasn't using another layer of nether steel to cover himself. He transformed his skin into nether steel, which explained his ability to stay flexible. If it was possible to coat oneself with solid objects and not being too affected, Felix would have been doing it always with his gemstone manipulation. As for transforming his skin like the Monkey King, he hadn't reached that level yet. Unless the Monkey King finds a way to counter Landlord, this will be the end of him. Fang declared noisily. There is nothing to do. Selphie smiled happily. This is Felix's victory. She was smart enough to know that the Monkey King was designed to fight with his wooden pole. When his electricity was countered and his fighting style became a hindrance, there was nothing much to do. Sure, he could escape or hide inside an unbreakable metal shield, but the alliance would never create a celestial that hide instead of fighting to provide entertainment. So, the Monkey King was forced to keep trading blows against Felix even when he knew that only one fate awaited him. It happened sooner than anticipated as his nether steel skin was finally removed, exposing his flesh in the open after his elemental energy was killed off completely. It was a good fight. Felix nodded calmly as he tightened his grasp on his crescent battleaxe and sliced the Monkey King's head in a single motion. Even though his head was separated from his body, the Monkey King still had the same indifferent expression. Thud! Felix beamed back his crescent battleaxe as he watched the Monkey King's separated body break into light particles. The only thing left behind was the wooden pole. Congratulations, you have successfully earned 150k points for slaying the Monkey King Celestial. Felix ignored the notification and walked towards the wooden pole. Now that it wasn't coated in metal, he could see that it had a couple of Futhark gemstones embedded at the bottom and the top. It has a nice weight to it. Felix murmured after picking the pole and seeing if he was comfortable in using it. If it was an epic artifact, he wouldn't have batted an eye, however, a legendary artifact capable of expanding its size? Although he wouldn't be able to take it out at the end of the game, he knew that it would come in handy. Felix stored it in his spatial card and sprinted in a random direction, continuing his hunt. Landlord's score is currently 300k points. He is making good progress, but will it be enough? Fang stated as he showed the other team's scores. Damn, most of them managed to take down another celestial. Baron frowned, the gap isn't shrinking at all. To make matters even worse, Felix spent the next 15 minutes sprinting and scanning non-stop. Still, nothing came in his radar. After all, this was an actual moon instead of a small map. So, Felix could only wish for the best and keep up his search. Half an hour later, Felix could be seen lying on the ground while squinting in front of him. He had his vision pushed to the limit, helping him see past 100 km of distance. What should I do here? Felix thought to himself as he watched a humongous ashen white serpent, smashing its tail all over the place. He could see that it was trying its best to strike two humanoid skeletons. Based on their skeleton structure alone, Felix recognized them to be Fagur and Aquamia. Will Landlord be daring enough to attempt and steal the celestial from their hands? Fang expressed with an eager tone, based on what I have seen, Landlord never backs away from challenges. Although he said so, most viewers felt that Felix would be quite foolish to get himself involved in such mess without backup. On the other hand, they also knew that it wouldn't be possible to find free celestials lying around. If your boy wants to catch up, he can't waste any opportunity. Erebus grinned, I hope he doesn't dip here. Oh, you don't have to worry about that. Thor smirked faintly as he watched Felix creating a new sniper rifle. The shape of it took everyone by surprise as it had a 10-meter barrel that was being supported by poles in the middle and the front. Nevertheless, what took the viewers back the most was the amount of electrical rings on the barrel. There were more than 100 of them lined up perfectly from the back to the front. Felix's usual sniper rifle merely had 3 meters barrel and 30 or 40 electrical rings. Yet, it still delivered an insane level of damage. Don't tell me Landlord is planning on kill-stealing from such a distance. Fang gulped a mouthful, that's a whole 100 kilometers in distance. Hell, neither the players nor the Celestial are capable of seeing him. The viewers could only hold their breaths in disbelief and anticipation as they watched Felix preparing his killer bullet. When they noticed red particles emerging from his hand and condensing into a thin dark red bullet, they felt chills course on their spine. All of them remembered the damage a single red marble caused in the dragon's ceremony. Don't tell me Landlord intends to take all 3 of them at once. That's precisely Felix's goal. He knew that he must take any chance he had to eliminate the other teams as well. This would help him reduce competition and also earn more points on his overall performance in the game. So, Felix kept condensing the Argodite bullet, turning it darker and darker. Although he had lost the passive, it didn't matter much since he easily picked it up again on his own. After Felix was finally satisfied with the bullet, he coated it with a protective coltonal pink gemstone. Then, he pushed the bullet inside the sniper rifle's chamber and closed one eye while squinting the other on the white serpent's torso. He knew that the distance was just too far, and it would be extremely difficult to land the bullet if he aimed it at the serpent's moving head. Boys, come on out and help me. The moment Felix finished his preparation, he created 2 crystallized copies of himself and made them lay next to him. They naturally possessed 2 wisps of his consciousness. I will be responsible over the last section, Felix 1 will handle the first section and the middle section will be left to you Felix 2. Felix disclosed calmly. On it. All right. Both wisps of consciousness replied to him causally, which was quite a freaky situation. It took a while for Felix to feel comfortable by it. They might have exact characteristics of Felix, but they still obey the main consciousness. The reason Felix summoned them in the first place was because of the insane number of electrical rings. He still couldn't control such a large number manually on his own, making him divide them into 3 segments. While Felix was on his last preparation stages, Aquamia and Fagur were seen struggling to slay the white serpent. I can't hold it any longer. Make your move already. Aquamia yelled out loud as she used humongous water chains to lock down the white serpent in one place. The white serpent wasn't making it any easier as it kept freezing the water with chilling air before gaining control over it. Crash! Crash! The instant it broke apart the ice chains, it turned them into weapons, launching them towards Aquamia. Meanwhile, Fagur was also using his shadows to capture the white serpent and limit its movement. Both of them were trying their very best to make the serpent lower its head to the ground, so Fagur could easily pop next to it from its shadow and sever it. That's it. Just a bit more. Fagur mewed as he watched the serpent's head being pulled by water chains and shadow hands. Just as the white serpent was about to get into the perfect position for him to make a move, its pupils expanded abruptly as it looked into a different direction. SSSSSSS. It let out a terrifying hissing noise before it started to enclose on itself with an ice shield. This had taken both Aquamia and Fagur by surprise. Before they could even properly discuss its peculiar behavior, their danger instincts started tingling out of nowhere. They didn't know what was happening or what was coming, but as veteran Empyrean players, they didn't spend even a split second to think about any of this. Was it enough, though? No one knew, as their eyes were soon consumed by a blinding flash of light before followed by an thunderous explosion that traveled around the entire moon 4 times. All the players stopped whatever they were doing and looked in direction of the explosion. The close ones were able to see a breathtaking mushroom cloud, hitting the ceiling of the transparent dome, while the ones on the other side of the moon merely heard the noise. That's a big one. Mipapo commentated causally. You think it's Jagat again? I don't know, and I don't care. Daydreamer replied indifferently as he continued on his journey. And I thought I was the boring and silent one. Mipapo cursed under his breath as he followed him, leaving the giant mushroom behind him. Meanwhile, the prime suspect of such explosive nukes had his eyes glued on the mushroom. Looks like that kid is still not giving up. Elder Forrester chuckled as he looked at his partner, knowing that no one else but those two were capable of casting such a mass-destructive explosion. Unless someone brought with him a legendary scroll. Even better. Jagat smiled coldly, not feeling threatened by Felix in the slightest. He knew that Felix was strong and had an abnormal resistance to fire, but that didn't affect his confidence one bit. He was considered as one of the true senior dragons in the universe, living for an unbelievable period of time. Compared to him, Prince Domino would merely appear as a baby chick. Let's keep going, big guy. Elder Forrester laughed softly. Nothing will matter if we remained in second rank. On the other hand, Gar and Nightguard N8 gave the explosion merely a blink of their focus since they were fighting another celestial. Still, Gar had Felix and Marquise Sebastian in his mind. Hopefully, Sebastian will take care of that brat on his own, not involving me into this. Gar wished to himself. He still had no clue that Marquise Sebastian was sent packing by Felix since Queen Ai didn't share such information. Since allying with other teams was forbidden, it wasn't possible to contact him telepathically. Focus. Nightguard N8 gave him a cold stare after reading his brain waves, which translated to reading his exact thoughts. Effer, I told you to stop that SHT. Gar cursed him angrily, not liking having his thoughts being read. Unfortunately, Nightguard N8's mental prowess was simply on another level, making him capable of doing even more than that. Back to Felix, he could be seen sprinting away from the mushroom cloud while glancing behind him once in a while. He had already received notification that he had slain the frozen serpent celestial, which pleased him greatly. There was no way the snake was going to survive such a destructive explosion. Though, when he checked the explosion zone, he didn't spot either Aquamia or Fagur. Knowing that at least Fagur could easily protect himself inside the Shadow Realm, Felix understood that he was still in danger. He could just as easily be chasing him from the Shadow Realm right now. Landlord has made the right decision to back off after taking his shot. Though, will it be enough to escape? Ulfang commentated while displaying Aquamia and Fagur both emerging from shadow of a boulder. Felix believed that only Fagur should have survived his explosion, but he couldn't be more mistaken. Right before the explosion occurred, Fagur had dragged himself and Aquamia inside the Shadow Realm. When the replay was played on the side in slow motion, it clearly showed that Aquamia was covered inside a dark sphere before getting pulled inside her own shadow. He already mastered the advanced ability Shadow Transportation, not bad. Siren commentated with a pleased tone after her champion was saved from elimination. While she was a bit nervous that her champion might not survive Felix's long-distance ambush, Erebus was as cool as a cucumber for this sole reason. I gave him some pointers years ago. Erebus smiled faintly. I also didn't think he will be still training it. Felix wasn't the only one capable of learning advanced abilities. In fact, he was still a newbie compared to those monsters, who had all the time in the world to focus purely on advanced abilities. Shadow transportation was one of the hardest ones as it allowed the owner to change the exterior structure of his target to make it compatible with the Shadow Realm. Hence, making it possible to allow even non-Shadowborns to access the Shadow Realm. How do you feel? Fagur asked calmly as he looked at Aquamia, who was holding her stomach with a twisted expression. Like my organs were flipped upside down. Shake it off. Fagur narrowed his eyes in direction of Felix. We have to catch those two bastards and get our points back. He didn't even need to guess. He was certain that this was the work of Felix since Jagat wasn't capable of pulling this off from such a long distance. You go ahead, I will catch up. Aquamia cursed, save me that human. I will make sure he goes through the same pain. Fagur started the chase swiftly through the Shadow Realm, making him bridge the distance between him and Felix in little to no time. Traveling across dimensions was always faster than the matter universe. He is alone. Fagur frowned after seeing that Felix was sprinting all by himself. Don't tell me he already got rid of his partner. Just to be certain, Fagur searched the nearby area. No wonder their score is moving up again. Fagur reasoned after not catching a single whiff of Marquis Sebastian. Aqua, catch up quickly, he is all alone. Fagur shared after popping his head from the Shadow Realm. We can take him down easily if we work together. On my way. Aquamia replied with a sadistic smile as she surfed on a self-created river. When you get near, don't expose yourself. Fagur warned, we have to catch him by surprise, and he might still be having his guard up. Sure enough, Felix had his vigilance heightened to the maximum. He kept it this way for the next hour until he traveled for more than thousands of kilometers. I can't run forever. Felix thought to himself, if Fagur is still chasing me, I can only actively bait him out. Felix knew that the unknown was more frightening. As long as he took away the unknown element, he wouldn't mind dealing with Fagur or any other player. So, he engaged with the first celestial he found in his journey. Landlord is targeting the three-headed hideous rat. Ulfang commentated, does he think that he is finally safe? This is terrible. Enir knitted his eyebrows as he stared at the highlighted Fagur hiding in Felix's shadow. The moment he leaves an opening, he will get assassinated. Elnora added with a worried tone. It looked like Felix didn't seem to worry about any of this as he swiftly began preparing another long-distance snipe to take down the three-headed giant rat. He manifested Sniper Rifle V3, which had the normal length barrel, then, he started condensing the red bullet without adding any of his copies. Fagur was watching all of this while being merely a meter away from Felix. Should I really wait for Aqua? She is still quite far away. Fagur thought inwardly, his neck is so near and unprotected. I can easily slice it in the blink of an eye when he fires his shot. Fagur knew that Felix's entire concentration would be on the rat to not miss his shot, that would provide him with the best opportunity to assassinate him. He understood that if he waited for Aquamia, they might not be given another chance like this, or it would take hours before it happened. Fagur wasn't planning on wasting hours dealing with Felix when the other teams were enlarging the gap with each chance they got. What if this was a bait? Landlord is quite shrewd. Fagur still wasn't too sure, he knew that Felix was too cunning to not anticipate himself getting ambushed by him. If this is a bait, what can he use to defend himself? Fagur scanned the entire area around Felix, wanting to see if he had anything hidden that could backfire on him. The only thing he ended up finding was the sniper rifle. This made him drop his suspicion, knowing that there was no way Felix would be quick enough to defend himself when his focus divided. What kind of Shadowborn would hesitate at this moment? Fagur narrowed his eyes coldly as he finally made up his mind to make his move. And so, he waited for Felix to finish his preparation of the red bullet while holding a dagger made out of solidified shadows. He was in perfect position to pounce on Felix, making the viewers hold their breath in anticipation. The instant Felix placed the red bullet in the rifle's chamber, he took a deep breath and squinted his eye at the three-headed giant rat. Fagur tightened his grasp on the dagger after seeing that Felix's focus was fully consumed in his snipe. Boom! Now! The instant the sniper rifles recoiled after firing off the bullet, Fagur launched himself from Felix's shadow and swung his dagger at his neck in the blink of an eye. Impossible! Unfortunately, the anticipated fountain of blood and flesh ripping apart wasn't delivered. Instead, the only feedback Fagur received was an insane pushing force immediately after his dagger touched Felix's neck. Cling! The noise produced further made his heart drop 2 folds as his worst nightmare ended up occurring. Retreat! Without an ounce of hesitation, Fagur ditched his dagger and attempted to pull back inside Felix's shadow. Too bad, Felix wasn't that forgiving. Hey! Fagur felt chills course on his spine after his vision was hit by a sudden pitch-black darkness. He couldn't sense any nearby shadows anymore as Felix had surrounded both of them with a cloud of corruption inducement. The corruption inducement was known to be able to absorb light particles, making it impossible for shadows to exist around it. After all, shadows and darkness were fundamentally different things as shadows were formed only when part of a light beam was blocked or redirected. You are in my world now. Felix whispered akin to a devil as he took hold of Fagur's waist that had the AP bracelet. He was so strong, he applied just a bit of force and Fagur's bones were broken into little fragments with his bracelet. Boom! Before Fagur could react to the pain, the noise of the nuke explosion had finally reached them. A chance! This rekindled Fagur's chance of escaping through the shadows, knowing that poison would get scattered forcefully by the shockwave. This did indeed happen, however, before Fagur could feel delighted, his expression turned petrified when he realized that the darkness didn't disappear. You might not see it, but we are locked inside a Dankanite dome. Felix smiled demonically as he came face to face with Fagur. Even though he couldn't see a damn thing, Fagur still felt his fingers curl up with every breath assaulting his face. He knew that he was locked in with a monster, and he was hopelessly unable to do anything about it. After all, he couldn't conjure shadows in darkness and his other countermeasures were ruined. Just like every Shadowborn, he always carried with him many objects that could emit light to be used in such terrible scenarios. Too bad, Felix was familiar with this habit and destroyed his AP bracelet. *CK this, I surrender. Fagur swiftly gave up on the game, knowing that he wouldn't be able to survive a single punch from Felix in such a close distance. Sure, he was ranked in the top 300 strongest players, but he was still a Shadowborn, his physical strength could never compare to the behemoth before him. Thank God he made a swift decision as Felix's deadly fist ended up going through his broken apart particles. Pretty decisive, hey? Felix clicked his tongue while unclenching his fist. Then, he got rid of the Dankanite dome, exposing him in the open. Only then did the stunned viewers finally came back to their senses as everything had occurred in less than a second. From the failed assassination to the surrender of Fagur. How the hell did Landlord pull this off? Ulfang was the first to remark loudly with a look filled with disbelief. He just couldn't believe that Felix was capable of firing that bullet while at the same time defend himself against one of the best assassins in the universe, who was barely a meter away from his neck. It just didn't make sense and was too supernatural. The only ones sharp enough to figure out Felix's strategy this quickly were primogenitors. Just brilliant as always. Erebus clapped his hands slowly while sighing in disappointment at his champion's unexpected elimination. We even warned them about his passive, one soul, many lives. Siren rubbed her eyelids in frustration, not liking the fact that her champion was left on her own. He might have considered it, but I doubt he thought that Felix can use it to place wisps of his consciousness within his own sniper rifle. Thor smirked. That's right. The secret to Felix's baiting strategy was the sniper rifle itself. Felix had split a wisp of his consciousness and placed it within his sniper rifle. While he was acting like his focus was on the rat, in reality, 99% of his concentration was placed on his shadow. Meanwhile, the hidden wisp of consciousness fired the bullet to lure out Fagur. That's why Felix had chosen his sniper rifle V3, as it was easily operated by just one wisp of his consciousness. When he emerged, it was easy for Felix to defend his neck by coating it with layer of Danbkanite. Since it was capable of reflecting elemental energies, the shadow dagger wasn't able to push through it at all or even force Felix out of his position. The rest was history. What shocked the viewers even more was the ending of the three-headed rat. Congratulations, you have successfully earned 150k points for slaying the three-headed hideous rat Celestial. With one single move, Felix had eliminated a player and also a Celestial. Don't tell me he is going to pull this off. Don't tell me he is going to pull this off. Marquis Sebastian palms sweated a bit as he watched the stream of the game in his castle. The only reason he had no problems getting eliminated this early from the game was his confidence in Felix's inability to win this game. In his eyes, Felix was simply against too many odds and the time wasn't his ally. However, the more he watched, the more nervous he got. Just relax, he has just tied up with 4th ranker's score. Marquis Sebastian exhaled to calm himself, he is still way too far from the 1st ranker. Even Felix didn't seem too pleased by his latest victory after glancing at the ranking. I have to slay 4 Celestials to catch up. Felix frowned, that's if the other teams failed to kill anything for the next 6 hours or so. Felix wasn't liking the sound of this because he knew that the Celestials' spawn wasn't infinite, there was a limited number of them and if they got slain, a god would be spawned. Felix understood that dealing with that god wasn't going to be a smooth experience. A couple of 100 kilometers away, another player wasn't having the best experience at the moment. It was none other than Aquamia, who found out about the elimination of her partner a few moments ago. Fagur! You stupid bastard! Couldn't you just wait for me? Aquamia cursed while halting her chase. Now that she had lost her partner, Aquamia wasn't too sure anymore about hunting down Felix. She wasn't delusional to believe that she could dominate Felix alone, especially when she knew that he had water abilities as well. So, she could only keep cursing Felix and her partner while surfing in the opposite direction. Minutes went by, then hours. Before long, only 1 hour left in the lifespan of the game. Felix's fans didn't seem as lively as always. All of them were either disappointed or placed in utter despair. It was clear that despairing viewers must have gambled on Felix heavily to win this game. Unfortunately, the score was frozen like this for the past hour. /1, Mipapo/Daydreamers team, 1,500k points. 2, Jagat/Elder Foresters team, 1,350k points. 3, Nightguard N8/Gars team, 1,200k points. 4, Unpaid Landlord/Marquis Sebastian's team, 1,200k points. 5, Fagur/Aquamia's team, 950k points// Landlord has really done an amazingly remarkable job on his own to bridge the gap to this extent. Ulfang shook his head, too bad, the others are just as good. The fact that Felix could be considered as third was quite admirable. To highlight just how difficult it was to hunt Celestials alone, Aquamia barely killed one after Fagur got eliminated. Meanwhile, Felix had slayed 7 in total without counting the first one. This is really an unfortunate game. Self sighed in frustration as she watched Felix searching for celestials with a solemn expression. She knew that he wasn't going to find one anytime soon since there wasn't a single celestial spawning anymore. The last alive celestial was currently fighting Mipopo and Daydreamer. Everyone knew that the moment they slay it, the game would step into the second phase. The God's Raid. Can Felix slay the god? Elnora wondered. He is always creating miracles, why can't he do it again? He will be earning 5 million points and instantly win the game. Easier said than done. Einir shook his head. It's not called a God's Raid for no reason. Clearly, they made the entities so strong, it wouldn't be possible to slay him without all the teams working together. There are only 8 players left. Elnora added, in fact, there are only 6 players left since Mipopo and Daydreamer would do their very best to make it impossible for others to slay the god. Selphie, Einir, and Baron nodded in agreement. They knew that Mipopo and Daydreamers would be securing their victory in this game after the Celestials stopped spawning. The only way for them to lose was to either get directly eliminated or slay the god and earn those 5 millions. So, why bother join the raid and help their enemies? Knowing that it's banned for teams to ally together, it will be extremely challenging for those 6 players to trust each other or even communicate properly. Baron mentioned. So, what are you saying? Kerwin said softly, is this game really over for Felix? Unfortunately, the odds say so. Einir sighed. Einir's pessimistic view was doubled down by other viewers as almost everyone believed that the game was going to end in favor of Mipopo and Daydreamer. Even the primogenitors thought so, and it didn't feel good to them. This is quite embarrassing to be honest. Erebus coughed, the non-2 champions winning over us. It happens. Cherif chuckled, not feeling too bothered by the thought. He knew that in Empyrean rank, everyone was a force to be reckoned with even if they represented no one. I am quite satisfied with seeing that little cutie finally lose a game. Kumiho giggled, I am curious to see his reaction. Kumiho was also part of the bet as Nightguard N8 represented her in this game. Since the Hive race weren't descendants of any one of them, naturally they weren't obliged to be sponsored by just one primogenitor. In this case, Siren and Kumiho had shared custody of them. You sure likes having your hopes up. Lady Sphinx remarked calmly. I am not raising them if the result is certain. Kumiho replied with a faint cold smile. She still wasn't over the last game, when she lost 3 monoliths at once. We will see about that. The moment Lady Sphinx said so, Queen AI announced throughout the entire moon. Congratulations! All the summoned celestials have been slain. Please prepare for the god's raid. He will be spawned in 1 minute at the dark side of the moon. You have been given the exact coordinates. Queen AI repeated the announcement 2 times, making everyone feel crestfallen but Mipopo and Daydreamer. I am still short of 3 celestials. Felix clutched his fists with a disheartened expression after seeing the new ranking. He really gave it his very best and still, it wasn't enough. Felix was sensible enough to understand that it wasn't the best time to mope around or blame his luck over this situation. He took a deep breath to ease his agitation and began a new journey towards the dark side of the moon. This time, he used his slingshot technique to help him arrive there faster than anyone else. He didn't use it before because it was extremely difficult to see anything while traveling at such crazy speed. He didn't want to go past celestials. Although Felix wanted to go there as quickly as possible, he had no intentions of fighting the god alone. He knew that the god possessed 5 times the strength of a celestial and also all of their abilities. All of their abilities in the sense that the god would be a strong mentalist, elementalist, and also possess 5 times the physical strength of a barbarian celestial. No matter how Felix thought about it, he saw no way to win against this behemoth on his own. Still, he was going, knowing that no other option was left. In a few moments at best, Felix landed at the dark side of the moon. It might be called the dark side, but it was equally lighted like the rest of the moon. This wasn't modified by anyone as it was a natural occurrence. That's because the sunlight fall equally on all sides of the moon. It was only dark to those viewing from the near planet due to a phenomenon known as tidal locking. Anyhow, Felix buried himself deep underground and made his golems close the hole before sending them away. Then, he drank the same potion that provided him with perfect invisibility in his previous game. Felix brought just one and saved it for this phase, knowing that he would be needing everything if he was placed in this damning scenario. Landlord has turned himself invisible near the spawn area of the god. Ulfang commentated, is he considering last hitting the god in case other players decided to fight it? Some thought that it was a smart idea while others believed that Felix was shooting himself in the foot. If he also hid, this will bring the numbers to merely 5 players. I doubt they will dare assault the god with such a few numbers while knowing that 3 players might be spying on them. Aspidakelone mentioned. Everyone nodded in agreement. Honestly, I wouldn't worry too much. Siren chuckled, that kid has still underestimated the prowess of the god. Even if Felix heard her, he wouldn't know what she was talking about. He was confident in his potion, the depth of the hole, and lastly, the isolating gemstone cube, where he was hiding in. Suddenly, Felix was forced to squint his eyes after a blinding flash of light emerged a couple of kilometers away from him. He was forced to do so while his vision provided him with merely infrared light. For everyone else? All of them ended up closing their eyes shut, feeling like they were staring directly into the sun. Ulfang swiftly dialed down the brightness to help his fellow viewers. Everyone started opening their eyes slowly after the light became gentle. When their eyes landed on the source, everyone was frozen in place with stunned expression, incapable of comprehending what they were seeing. Is that an actual god? Is that an actual god? One of the viewers mewed with a look filled with awe at the sight of a golden illuminating statue with thousands of arms and 4 heads facing each cardinal direction. The statue was hovering slightly above ground, defying gravity with its mouse size. The size alone was enough to install fear in anyone's hearts as it made the scorpion celestial resemble an ant before an elephant. As for its heads, each one had a different visage and expression, making him seem quite bizarre and otherworldly. How in the hell anyone can take this down? Elnora mewed while trying her best to stare directly into the god's eyes. Even while she was away and safe, she was still feeling somewhat terrified of him. Everyone removed any notion of having their idols slay this ethereal entity. In their eyes, they would be proud if they managed to remove one of his arms. Abruptly, one of the god's heads moved slowly to the right and stared into the area where Felix was buried. When the viewers looked into the head's 3 eyes, they saw a reflection of a white crystal cube. No one knew how was that even possible when Felix was buried many kilometers away. Oh no! Just as Felix's fans were about to express their worry, their words ended up halting at their throat at the sight of the crystallized cube being forcefully dug out from the ground by mere telekinesis. Then, the crystallized cube was brought next to the god's head, making the dumbfounded Felix come face to face with him. The entire sequence happened in less than a split second, leaving Felix's mind still in shambles throughout the process. I am Scray. Boom. Before Felix could finish his sentence, one of the statue's golden palms slapped the crystallized cube away like it was swatting an insect. The cube was sent flying to the stars, disappearing out of sight almost instantly. The viewers could only watch speechlessly as the virtual gods pulled back his palm to its resting position. He neither spoke nor had a change of expression, like dealing with Felix was merely a child's play. When Ulfang switched to Felix's camera, he saw the cube buried deep within a moon's natural crater, leaving only half of it exposed. Crack! Suddenly, the cube cracked apart and turned into many big fragments. This showed Felix bleeding from his nose while holding his temples with deep wrinkles on his forehead. F***ing hell, he slapped the wind out of me. Felix grimaced painfully as he felt like his entire body had its organs rearranged. No one had a clue how truly monstrous the force was in that palm, though, the white adamantine cube breaking apart should tell them enough. Well, this is quite bad for Felix. Asna frowned as she fixed her sitting posture to a more serious one. I know, that virtual entity's mental strength is already enough to put him in place. Candace nodded. The fact that the god was able to fish out Felix from such a far distance by merely sensing his brain waves was already scary enough. Don't even mention his physical prowess that could break even white adamantine, something that Felix couldn't even pull off with his monstrous strength. After Felix recovered, he jumped outside the crater and looked in direction of the moon's dark side. He couldn't even see it in the horizon, making him realize that he must have traveled at least half of the moon. This isn't right. Felix knitted his eyebrows. I know that the virtual god should be strong, but not to this degree. Felix knew that even if he was a god, he should have either a weakness to defeat him or balanced strength to deal with him if they worked together. After what happened to him, he completely dropped the second assumption, knowing that even if 100 of them fought, they would never defeat him. He must possess some sort of weakness. Felix said, unless I found it, I can forget about getting near him. For now, Felix decided to return to the dark side and analyze the virtual god from a distance. When he arrived, he found out that Jagat, Elder Forester, and the rest of the Empyreans were already there. Only Mipapo and Daydreamer were nowhere to be seen, the rest were staying in exposed areas while staring at the virtual golden statue from a distance. All of them shared the same solemn expression at the behemoth size of the virtual god. Felix ignored them for now and zoomed in, wanting to study everything about his target. Unfortunately, he didn't find anything noteworthy since the virtual god was exactly like a statue. Unmoving and unreactive. What do you think, Miriam? Sage Arthur asked as he eyed holographic screen, that was displaying the current silent standoff. It's over for them. Miriam replied lazily while popping a chewing gum. The Ruiner and the rest of the newly appointed upper echelon of the war room all nodded in agreement. It was only natural that Arthur would call for everyone to an emergency meeting for the sake of watching this game and studying Felix's strength much better. After all, he was their most important target in their upcoming war. I think the same. Arthur smiled faintly, the virtual god's stats are just too insane. When Ulfang highlighted them, everyone couldn't help but believe the same. The virtual god has 4 heads for a reason. Each one is responsible over a type of power. Ulfang disclosed as he took advantage of the player's inactivity to explain the virtual god's powers. The northern head with 3 eyes can only use mentalist abilities. The southern head with the salamander's looking mouth can use only magma abilities. Ulfang paused and highlighted the remaining 2 heads. The goat-like western one can use light abilities while the last eastern one uses metal abilities. The more information they heard, the harder their confidence in their idols crashed. In their eyes, there was simply no way their idols could win against a triple elementalist virtual god with strength to break the moon and mental prowess to lock down kilometers of radius. Sneaking up wasn't going to work and facing him head first would be a fatal mistake. I know what you are thinking, but the virtual god isn't an immortal being. Ulfang grinned, he also possessed a weakness and quite an inconvenient one. This brought some hope to the viewers. Alas, his answer wasn't what they had expected. The virtual god can only use the abilities of 2 heads at once. It was a weakness all right, but even an idiot here knew that it still didn't change much. Using abilities of 2 heads was still more than enough to crash their idols. The worst part? Felix and the others had no idea about this, and it wasn't easy to find out about it. As expected, Felix and the others soon gave up on studying the virtual god after not finding anything useful. I guess I am left with only one option. Felix rubbed his eyelids in irritation as he glanced at Jagat. It looked like Jagat had the same thought as he was caught staring back at Felix. Both them seemed to dislike their mutual idea greatly. I need to make sure first that he wouldn't backstab me. That F***er will backstab me without countermeasures. Again, they both reached the same conclusion that it would be impossible to trust each other with their rich history. Felix decided to make the first move as he approached Elder Forester and Jagat. When Night Guard N8, Gar, and Aquamia saw this, they traded glances between each other and made their moves as well. In a few moments, they were all gathered inside a deep crater that was tens of kilometers away from the virtual god. All of them kept a decent distance from each other. I believe everyone here reached the same conclusion. Elder Forrester eyed everyone before disclosing with a solemn tone, "We cannot slay that virtual god without working together." No one argued with that, even the proud Jagat. "So, let's make it simple and swear on our names and reputation to not backstab each other." Elder Forrester proclaimed, "I trust that no one will break their words under the public eye." Since Queen Ai couldn't be used to deliver messages between each other or write any contract, they could only do it this way. Honestly, the best second option was to swear on their ancestors or sponsors. Too bad, they couldn't make this happen without exposing their existence to everyone. "I agree. Fine by me. Tisk, I guess there is no other option." One by one, Felix and the others voiced their agreement to be loyal to this temporary alliance. It might seem unreliable, but everyone knew that reputation for those authoritative figures meant too much to them. Jagat was an official of the Green Dragon clan. Elder Forrester was one of the Heavenly Turtle's ministers. Gar was known as the hidden guardian of the Gremlin's royal family. Aquamia was from the noble family of the fisherman race. There was no need to mention Midgard N8. I am not too sure about Landlord, though. Jagat narrowed his eyes at Felix. "Human words can be treated the same as shit on the sidewalk. Name once when I broke my word." Felix replied calmly. "Shut the *CK up next time then." Felix didn't hesitate to cuss Jagat after he failed to produce anything. "You. Enough." Elder Forrester interfered before this could go an extra mile. Then, he continued on, "Let our people be the judge of our characters. For now, let's produce a plan. Now that I have your trust, I will be creating a telepathic channel for us. I just need you to relax your mental defenses." Midgard N8 sent a telepathic message in everyone's minds forcefully. If it were anyone else requesting this, no one would bother entertaining such an insane thought, even if there was a Queen Ai contract. However, this was coming from Midgard, who vowed on the name of Queen Scarlet to not harm or betray them. Everyone trusted him completely that he would not backstab them, even Felix. That's because vowing on the Hive Queen made it impossible for him to go against it even if he wanted. It wasn't because of intimidation or worship. All Hive members were wired from birth that when the Queen's name gets used as a vow, it would be the same as she was the one giving it. And so, everyone relaxed their mental defenses to allow the telepathic channel to be created. Can anyone hear me? Yes. Good, this will help us not feed intel to Mipapo and Daydreamer. Indeed. Felix and the others knew that Mipapo and Daydreamer might be spying on them from a spatial pocket right this instant. They couldn't be any more correct. What are they talking about? Daydreamer asked as he sat behind Mipapo on a floating giant moon boulder. They moved to telepathic conversation. Mipapo replied with an irritated tone. That's unfortunate. Daydreamer expressed casually, but, it wouldn't matter much. You saw what happened to Landlord. It was only natural that those two would arrive near the virtual god much faster than Felix with Mipapo's wormhole ability. I know, but I still feel uneasy about them working together. Mipapo answered while using the spatial waves to shape up an image on the real dimension. This made him see everyone as mere fuzzy grey auras, but it was still better than nothing. As long as we remain here, we can easily void any chance they have to slay the virtual god. Daydreamer wasn't worried in the slightest. Looks like they are up to something. Mipapo's antennas straightened up after noticing two kinds of intense energies being created by Felix and Jagat. If his vision wasn't altered, he would have noticed that they were condensing a spherical green orb and a red bullet. Oh my goodness! Landlord and Jagat are planning to merge their nuke abilities. Fang gulped a mouthful in fear and excitement. His reaction was shared by the viewers and even the other players, knowing that the damage produced from such a deadly combination might be the solution they were looking for. This was the idea that both Felix and Jagat believed would produce positive results. It was approved by their allies since there wasn't really any other option at the moment. Felix and Jagat made sure to keep condensing their abilities until they reached the limit. Are you confident that little bullet will carry the same punch as my supernova orb? Jagat mocked as he eyed Felix's tiny wine-colored bullet that was barely 1 centimeter big. I am not done yet. Felix replied calmly as he started condensing another Argodite bullet. When he was done condensing it, he began working on another one under the dumbfounded eyes of his allies and viewers. Does he have an infinite pool of energy? He never runs out of it. After he finished, he wiped his sweaty forehead and placed the 3 tiny bullets inside a bigger hollow coltonal bullet. You fire first to match my bullet's speed. Felix remarked casually as he placed the bullet inside his sniper rifle. Jagat got pissed off at Felix's condescending tone, but he had nothing to retort with. He knew that if they fired both at the same time, his supernova orb would barely cross 5 meters before Felix's bullet explode on the virtual god. He believed that Felix might end up slaying the virtual god before him if the explosion was too much to handle. So, he could only lower his pride a bit and breathe out the supernova orb. It was slow enough Felix was able to see its trajectory and traveled distance. So, the moment it was about to collide with the virtual god's back, Felix took his shot. This time, everyone was prepared and closed their eyes shut for the anticipated fireworks. What fireworks it was, as the entire sky was lit up by 2 suns, one 3 times bigger than the other. They completely hid the virtual god, which was an insane feat on its own. Boom! A split second later, the unbearable noise and shockwaves traveled at an insane speed and reached Felix and the others, forcing them to hide at the bottom of the crater. When the chaos died down, all of them returned to the surface and focused on the mushroom cloud that was touching the transparent ceiling. Did it work? Aquamia inquired as she tried her very best to find the virtual god inside the mushroom cloud. Aquamia had gotten her answer before anyone could open their mouths. Dear Lord! All of them felt chills course on their spine as they saw the golden statue emerge from the smoke and dust with his entire body intact. He merely lost a couple of arms and dragged a few more on the ground. The rest were scorched up a bit, and that's all. What made Felix and the others feel petrified was the sight of those arms growing back again after being put under a shimmering gentle light. In a few moments, the virtual god's body was perfect again. The only difference between now and then was his expressionless cold eyes being placed on Felix and the others. They were caught red-handed. Dear God, have mercy on us. Let's retreat for now, arg. Before Felix and the others could even consider walking away, they were all assaulted by an intense flash of light, forcing them to close their eyes tightly and lower their heads. The only one, who managed to swiftly recover, was Gar, as he had used his darkness element to counter the extreme illumination. The moment he opened his eyes, he felt his blood run cold at the sight of the golden statue standing in front of them with many of his palms clenched into fists. With him being this close and emitting light everywhere, he truly resembled a god coming down to punish puny mortals like them. Gar didn't spend even a split second thinking of the unimaginable teleportation of the virtual god. The first thing he did was hide inside a pool of darkness without alarming anyone. Still, Felix and the others swiftly manifested their protection abilities around them even though they had no clue what was happening. Their danger instincts screamed at them to do so. Boom boom boom. Good thing they listened as the virtual god started plummeting the crater with hundreds of destructive fists and palms. They were so powerful, the moon was cracking like it was being assaulted by an earthquake. Soul X-ray vision. Felix swiftly cancelled the visible light, leaving only electromagnetic radiation that allow him to see bones and such. This helped him open his eyes and negate the intense blinding light completely. The first thing he saw was countless sets of humongous boned arms smashing the area, and the skeletons of his allies struggling to fend against this onslaught. Crack! Suddenly, Felix looked up after hearing cracking noise of his white adamantine dome. **T. We will be dead in a few seconds at best. Felix quickly reinforced the integrity of the crystal dome and made it much bigger to defend against his allies as well. Felix knew that he still needed them to defeat this behemoth. Elder Forester, quickly create an underground tunnel to get us out of here. Gar, use a layer of darkness to cover the crystal dome. The rest reinforce my barrier. Felix shouted in the telepathic channel, taking the lead since he was the only one capable of seeing and doing something about it compared to Gar. On it. Elder Forester gave up on his own soil barrier and focused on digging a tunnel beneath them. Meanwhile, Gar popped out of his darkness hole and covered the crystal dome with the darkness layer even though he didn't like to be ordered by Felix. The oath they took ensured that he would also do his best to defend the alliance's interest. After all, there was no point in allying together if a couple of players were planning to sit back and chill. As for Aquamia and Midgard, they used pressured water and mental pressure to reinforce the crystal dome from the outside. Only Jagat stayed unmoving since his fire was absolutely useless against such attacks. The tunnel is ready. Elder Forester disclosed from within the giant hole behind them. Before Felix could say anything, Jagat and Gar were the first to ditch their positions and escape through the tunnel. Fortunately, Gar's external manipulation range was at least 8 kilometers if not more. So, the darkness layer still protected the others after he was gone. Cowards! Aquamia cursed them. Go ahead first. Felix permitted Aquamia and Midgard, not bothering too much with Jagat and Gar. All right. Midgard N8 nodded expressionlessly and flew inside the tunnel. This still doesn't make us even. Aquamia left an irritated remark as she chased after Midgard N8. After everyone was gone, Felix felt that the link to his group telepathic channel was being cut, giving him the cue to begin his retreat. Crack crack crack. However, the crystallized dome started cracking much faster, forcing him to focus on reinforcing it again. Landlord has been left in a pitch. Ulfang commentated as he showcased the cracked crystal dome through the chaotic thrashing of the golden arms. He will be doing us a favor if he died here. Arthur remarked with a hopeful tone. Unfortunately, before the Darken faction members and the rest of Felix's enemies could even feel the same hope, it was destroyed by the sight of him creating 5 crystallized domes layered one beneath the other. This gave Felix the time to escape through the tunnel, knowing that each crystallized dome would buy him a couple of seconds. Crack! Boom! Crack! That's precisely what happened as by the time the virtual god destroyed the last dome, Felix was already tens of kilometers deep underground with his allies. The virtual god finally stopped his never-ending assault after realizing he sensed no one below him anymore. Just like a robot, he pulled his arms back to their resting position and remained frozen in his place, not bothering to chase them down. What do you guys think? Elder Forester inquired while continuing to dig forward. Everything about his assault was unexpected. Aquamia replied while chasing him from behind with the others. The fact that our most powerful attack failed to deal any serious damage is enough to let you recognize that the game is done for. Gar remarked while peeking at Felix with a faint smirk. Just like Marquis Sebastian, he was also tasked with making Felix's defeat his priority, so, he was pleased by the whole shitty situation even though he was also part of the alliance. Felix knew what was on his mind and didn't bother to entertain him. It's impossible that the alliance will create an unbeatable entity. Felix frowned, we just need to find his weakness, so, did you guys see anything peculiar throughout the fight? Everyone revisited their memories and analyzed everything about the virtual god, however, because of the blinding light, they didn't have much to work with. Felix also did the same, because he had perfect memory, he reimagined everything as it was. After a careful and rigorous analyze, he finally found something peculiar. Wasn't he levitating the first time I saw him? Felix was startled to see that the virtual god was sitting on the ground after he emerged from their nukes. He also didn't use his mental abilities when he was plummeting us. Felix reasoned, he could have easily attacked us mentally to affect our focus and defensive abilities. Unless... Felix snapped his eyes wide open after he reached an logical explanation to virtual gods pulling back his punches. He can't use all of his abilities simultaneously. Hey! What makes you think that? Mind clarifying. His allies were taken aback by Felix's finding as they didn't expect such a peculiar reasoning. The virtual god can use mental abilities, light abilities, and I believe that he is also a metal elementalist. Felix shared, after all, he shouldn't have survived our nukes if his skin wasn't reinforced by the golden SUPREMACY metal. Felix's experience with the Monkey King made him more certain about his conclusion. Everyone nodded in agreement to this part since light element was clearly used for the virtual god to teleport instantly next to them and blind them. As for the metal part, it just made sense. In both occasions when he used light element, he wasn't using his telekinesis to levitate or attack us. Felix added, plus, when this happens, the head with the 3 eyes seemed more dead. When Felix put it like this, everyone couldn't help but react strongly when they revisited their memories and focused on those small details. You are right. The eyes really seem dead compared to the other 2 heads. Where are you leading with this? Gar scoffed, not liking that Felix was giving everyone a bit of hope. Isn't it clear? Nightguard N8 replied expressionlessly, each of the virtual god's head is responsible over one aspect of his strength. In other words, he can only use 2 heads at once. Aquamia added, this is his weakness. It doesn't seem like it's a useful one. Gar retorted, we had our asses handed to us even when he used the powers of 2 heads. It matters since now we can actually plan properly to defeat him. Felix narrowed his eyes, the only reason we failed to kill him is because of his metal defenses and light healing powers. So, we just need to find out about which head is responsible for those 2 elements and decapitate them. Felix wasn't sure at the start about the true weakness of the virtual god, but now he was convinced that the heads are the key to slaying him. We have to start with head responsible over the light element. Elder Forrester remarked, it provided him with the speed of light, insane healing, and also blinding effect. He is right, as long as we don't get rid of it first, all of our efforts would be for naught. Aquamia nodded. How will we do that, geniuses? Gar sneered, you forgot that of his heads are covered with SUPREMACY metal and even nukes didn't damage them. Everyone went into deep thought at the sound of that, knowing that this was more complicated than it appeared. If they started with the metal head, the virtual god would use the light head to teleport away and come back after recovering his metal head. If they targeted the light head first, it wouldn't be easy to take it down with the extreme defenses from the metal head. The worst part, we still don't know what the 4th head is responsible for. Don't forget that he will be able to use his mental attacks if we removed one of his heads. Shit. No wonder this is worth 5 million points. Elder Forrester sighed, it's far too hard with just us. Good, 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 fall back to despair. Gar grinned in his mind as he looked at everyone's distressed expressions. However, when he turned to look at Felix, he couldn't help but feel threatened. He saw him sitting in a mediation position above a horse-like golem with his eyes closed shut and deep wrinkles in his forehead. From time to time, he murmured something before shaking his head. Don't tell me he is actually thinking of a plan to win this. Gar soon laughed in his mind, even if he is landlord, there is no way he can find a tactic to pull this off. Absolutely no way. While Felix was squeezing his brain to weave a proper strategy, Nightguard N8 and the others were also suggesting ways to defeat the virtual god. They might seem hopeless, but it didn't mean that they had given up already. However, every proposal was shot down due to either a couple or many issues in their strategies. When none of them was proposing anything, Gar smirked as he spoke to Felix, do you have anything to add, the great landlord? Felix opened his eyes slowly and found that everyone's eyes were on him. He could see from their expressions that most of them had already lost interest in fighting the virtual god. Felix didn't like that one bit. I have thought of a plan, but it's incomplete. Felix remarked calmly. Then why bother telling us about it? Gar scoffed. Don't speak for us. Night Guard N8 requested composedly as he looked at Felix, please, do tell. The rest also perked their ears in interest, knowing that Felix was the most cunning and shrewd in this pack. Without delay, Felix fed them all the details about his strategy, making them show multiple emotions throughout his narration. A couple of minutes later, Felix concluded, this is all I have. It's even worse than incomplete. Gar frowned, we might lose our lives in the blink of an eye. How is that my problem? Felix eyed him indifferently, if you can't even use your surrender coupon in time, that's on you. He is right. We all have surrender coupons, so we can at least try it. Elder Forrester added, it's less shameful than hiding here for an hour until the game ends. No one argued with that premise, authoritative figures like them have too much of a face. So, if there was a chance of a victory, they were obliged to attempt it. All in? Felix asked. Aquamia and the rest nodded their heads with resolved expressions, even Gar was forced to participate. *CK them, I will low-key sabotage. You better do your part properly, Gar. Felix warned out loud, you don't want your people to see that their guardian isn't as honorable as he shows. You. Gar's shady planning was halted before he could even finish his thought. We have our eyes on you. Felix narrowed his eyes on Gar, making the others also show displeased expressions as they looked at him. They weren't dumb to not understand that Gar might attempt to sabotage their plan for the sake of making Felix lose the game due to their faction's enmity. But that crap might fly if he did it to Felix alone, but when it involved them as well, they wouldn't allow it. Bastard! You better drop your accusations. Gar growled at Felix furiously, I never had such bad intentions, and if you don't apologize, I will not participate. I guess I am mistaken then, sorry about that. Felix apologized immediately with a sincere smile. Felix wasn't concerned about losing a bit of face like this, the only thing that mattered to him was this bastard doing his part in the strategy properly. He might not like to admit it, but without Gar, the plan would be scrubbed. Cunning, shameful prick. Gar gritted his teeth at Felix's apology. He wanted to use Felix's accusation to leave the alliance after hearing their plan. Alas, he knew that he couldn't get out now without making himself appear like a coward to his people. This might displease his ancestor, but he also cared about his reputation more than his faction war. Looks like they're going to give it another go. Fang commentated as he watched Felix and the others digging up towards the surface. Naturally, they did so after they made sure that the virtual god wouldn't be near them. After they made it to the surface, they returned to their previous battle area and were met with the virtual god sitting on the ground in his lotus position. Let's begin. Felix announced as he started to condense another red bullet. Jagat was doing the same with his supernova orb. Again? Haven't they learned their lesson? Fang remarked with a disappointed look that was shared by the rest of the viewers. Felix didn't care about anyone's reaction as he shoved the bullet in his sniper rifle's chamber and waited for Jagat to fire his orb. Just like before, he managed to match the explosions together, causing the moon and the virtual god to suffer through another destructive nuke. Now! Go go go! However, this time everyone was taken aback by the sight of Felix and his allies charging at their top speed towards the rising mushroom cloud. They forced themselves through the shockwave and continued their united charge. The moment the virtual god emerged from the mushroom cloud with brilliant light surrounding him and healing all of his wounds, Felix ordered in the telepathic channel, Gar, now! Damn it! Darkness overlay! Gar cursed under his breath but still did his part in the plan as he cast an enormous darkness screen that intercepted the blinding light and started absorbing it. Light countered darkness and darkness countered light. This created a balanced state in the incoming illumination, allowing Felix and the others to see through the darkness screen. It wasn't perfect, but at least they had some sort of vision to work with. Fly! Everyone used their unique ways to fly towards the virtual gods' heads. Night Guard N8 used telekinesis to lift himself, Aquamia used pressured water steam to push herself, an elder forester drank a flight potion, giving him 5 sets of humongous feathery wings at the sides of his shell. Gar just submerged himself in his darkness screen and controlled it to keep pushing forward in the air. It's time for you to shine. Felix beamed his wooden pole and covered it in white adamantine before making it grow taller. Then, he used the same technique of the Monkey King, allowing himself to get launched towards the virtual god's head's akin to a bullet. He was much faster than the darkness screen, making him lose out its protection, but Felix didn't care as he adjusted his vision to accept the bare minimum of light, allowing him to negate the extreme illumination. This was much better than not accepting light completely. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The virtual god didn't remain standing as he launched his golden palms to intercept them. It was tough, but everyone managed to navigate through the fury of tens of palms safely due to their visions not being hindered anymore and their low numbers. After all, the previous nukes had destroyed many arms, which were used to defend the 4 heads. It would be impossible for the heads to survive the explosions if it wasn't for that. The eastern head is the one using metal abilities. To your positions. Felix commanded as he used his electromagnetic arcs to swing from one giant arm to another, making it almost impossible to hit him. While he was swinging, his eyes never left the 2 heads, which had their eyes shimmering brightly. Because of his modified vision, he was able to spot the difference in brightness between the eyes of both heads. It was only logical to assume that the eyes of the light head would be extra bright. I am behind you. Night Guard N8 informed as he chased after Felix. Good, everyone else. Protect us. The moment Felix made this call, he swung himself one last time, making him come face to face with the metal head. Its face was based off a gorilla with 2 narrow eyes and bushy eyebrows, making it seem quite threatening. Yet, Felix didn't even flinch as he summoned an electromagnetic storm around him, that linked with any metal near it. This made it possible for him to remain suspended in midair. Then, he made his long crystallized long pole be submerged inside an orange water tentacle that possessed mental enhancing sacred attribute. Catch! He swung the pole towards Night Guard N8, he caught it and made himself get submerged inside the orange water tentacle, not caring about being harmed by it. Blow him up! Aquamia shouted at Night Guard N8 after seeing him get pushed by Felix near the gorilla's face. Unfortunately, the virtual gods had sensed danger from him and sent many golden fists in his direction. Intercept them! Felix yelled as he protected Night Guard N8 with crystallized white shields, managing to block some palms. The rest were handled by his allies as Aquamia used pressured water to change their trajectories while Jagat kept firing minimized destructive orbs to keep them away. Under the dumbfounded eyes of the viewers, Felix and his teammates acted as bodyguards, surrounding Night Guard N8 from different areas and making sure that nothing reached him. Gar mainly focused on protecting their eyes with darkness screens in front of them. Night Guard N8 didn't drop the ball and made their efforts go for naught as he channeled his strongest mental attack and released it inside the gorilla's head. In less than a second, the gorilla's head had his eyes completely blown out into bloody mess and followed by red blood gushing out of his ears, nose, and even his mouth. Still, he wasn't dead yet and used his metal manipulation to release sharp metallic projectiles in front of him, not caring where they land. Arg! I am hit! I can't hold them any longer. F***ck. I am hit too. Aquamia, Jagat, and Gar yelled in the telepathic channel as they got either pierced by one of those sharp metallic projectiles, or were forced to extend their protection to them as well. After all, they were being hit by countless palms while doing their best to protect Night Guard N8. Now, they even needed to watch for metallic projectiles. The viewers knew that they would get either turned into meat skewer by those projectiles or a meat paste by one of the palms. Just hold it a little longer. Felix yelled as he kept sending the projectiles to the ground with his electromagnetic field. Felix's lightning element was just too strong against metal. Too bad, the others didn't have it as easy as him. F***ck this, I am out. Gar was the first to ditch the team by surrendering. He might be hiding inside one of the darkness screens, but he was still able to feel pain when the projectiles pierce it. With him gone, the darkness screens disappeared, leaving Aquamia, Jagat, and Elder Forester completely exposed to blinding light. F*CKU. Mother *er. Arg, I surrender. They didn't hesitate to curse out Gar, knowing that he could have survived for a few more seconds. But, clearly the F*er took advantage of the first opportunity he had to sabotage them, and specifically Felix. Felix already knew that this was bound to happen, making him watch his teammates giving up one by one to save themselves from getting squashed. Even Elder Forester gave up, knowing that he was completely hopeless against the blinding light. So, instead of cursing anyone, Felix extended his arms wide and yelled in his mind, "Enhanced electromagnetic field. SZLZLZLZLZLZLZLZL." The electromagnetic field around him expanded rapidly while being filled with extremely thick purplish lightning arcs. When the golden palms attempted to pierce through the field and reach him and Midgard N8, they get deflected away. While it looked like the defensive formation was restored solely by Felix, everyone could see that this was barely a temporary countermeasure. Landlord is forced to feed his field every time a clash occurred. Ulfang shouted as he showed Felix's twisted face as he kept the field intact through the bombardment. Before the viewers' hopes could start crashing down, Midgard N8 finally opened his wasp-like eyes and snapped his finger. Simultaneously, the gorilla's skull started cracking from within for a few moments before it exploded into blood, brain matter, and giant skull's fragments. Instantly, the arms stopped assaulting Felix's field as two of the virtual gods' heads opened their mouths and released the most ear-piercing agonizing scream ever heard. It was followed by the virtual god's golden skin fading away, exposing a dark skin underneath that looked just as fleshy as anyone else. Woohoo! They did it, they did it! Elnora screamed in excitement as she jumped out of her chair, sharing the joy and thrill of the rest of the spectators. Everyone cheered with reddened cheeks as they watched the virtual gods flailing his arms in agony after losing one of his heads. He might act like a robot, but he was still designed to feel pain like everyone else. While most were delighted by this achievement, Mipapo, Marquise Sebastian, and Gar all shared one emotion: distress and worry. "Should we make our move now?" Mipapo asked with an anxious tone, not liking how things were developing. "Not yet." Daydreamer calmed him down. "They still have 3 heads to take down while there are just 2 of them, we don't need to do anything." His belief was shared by the primogenitors who weren't moved at all by the gorilla's head explosion. Next target. Felix also neither celebrated nor had a single notion of giving up after losing majority of his team. He took advantage of the virtual god's lack of concentration to swing Midgard N8 with his pole towards the 3-eyed head that was responsible over mental attacks. "Buy me time!" Felix shouted as he traveled towards the goat-like head, which was using the light element all along. In midair, Felix was getting bigger and bigger until he was at least 100 meters high, making him possess the same size of the goat's head. Bam! Without an ounce of hesitation, Felix enlarged the crystallized pole to match his size and used it as a weapon to smash the left cheek of the goat's head. This seemed to have finally awakened the virtual god as he stopped flailing his arms and used a couple to block his goat's head and the rest to rain down on Felix with attacks. At the same time, he was using his light element to grow back the exploded gorilla's head and heal his other wounds. Oh no! The virtual god is prioritizing the recovery of his body. Ulfang commentated with a concerned tone. When Felix saw this, he didn't react as nervously as others since he had anticipated as much and had already planned against it in his strategy. In a swift manner, Felix swapped the white adamantine into orange olivesling, coating his entire pole with it. Then, he discharged orange electricity through it all, enhancing the hallucinating effect of the olivesling gemstone. With light shining everywhere, it was reflected on the orange crystallized pole and caused the goat's head to be affected by it negatively. It might not be powerful enough to put the goat's head into hallucination, but it did a wonderful job of messing with his elemental manipulation since it relied heavily on concentration. Bam! 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 To make matters worse, Felix kept using it to smash him in the head with each opportunity he got. After all, he was still prioritizing evading the giant palms. They might have lost their golden skin, but just the barbarian force they carried was enough to deform Felix. I can't hold him much longer. Nightguard N8 warned Felix abruptly. While Felix was attempting to destroy the goat's head, Nightguard N8 was doing his very best to keep the three-eyed head in check. He was using all he got to match up the mental prowess of the three-eyed head, knowing that if he relaxed his pressure just a little, he would switch his target to Felix. Knowing that the hive race never fooled around made Felix understand that Nightguard N8 was really at his limit. F***CK. I need to go harder. Without an ounce of hesitation, Felix put almost his entire focus on the goat's head, leaving dodging the palms to purely his instincts. Boom boom boom. He kept whipping the guarded arms with explosive bursts of electricity, causing them to turn numb. Before long, the arms were completely paralyzed, forcing them to fall down and expose the goat's head in the open. Arg! Unfortunately, the moment that happened, Felix ended up getting smashed directly by one of the palms, making him spew out a fountain of blood from his mouth. It wouldn't be an overstretch to assume that some of his organs had ruptured. Yet, Felix toughened through the agony and used an electromagnetic arc to pull himself back near to the goat's head as swiftly as possible. Then, boom! 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 The goat's head suffered through the worst beating since his creation as the crystallized pole kept bursting his face wide open, making him resemble a survivor of 24 hours MMA fight. This sense of doom made the virtual god resort to his escape ability, wanting to blink away. Unfortunately, his mind was constantly under the hallucinating effect from the reflected light. This made it almost impossible for him to focus on attacking Felix, defending his head, healing his wounds, and now even escape. Break, break, break for me. With one hoarse scream, the goat's skull finally ended up cracking under Felix's never-ending onslaught. One crack was followed by another, and then another. With one last powerful strike, the bloody crystallized pole had finally burst through the goat's head, spreading giant chunks of brain matter and flesh in direction of Nightguard N8 and the three-eyed head. Good work, Sir Landlord, good work. Unfortunately, my time has come. Nightguard N8 remarked expressionlessly as he watched the blood and flesh being pushed away by his telekinesis barrier. We are so close. Felix yelled back, not pleased one bit by Nightguard N8's statement. I apologize, but I am at my limit. Nightguard N8 shook his head and voiced his surrender to Queen AI, finally giving up on the mental battle between him and the three-eyed head. I have weakened the mental prowess temporarily of the three-eyed head. Nightguard N8 left one last remark, if you want to win this, slay him as fast as possible, good luck. Following the disappearance of the Nightguard N8, the last remaining heads of the virtual god screamed in agony yet again after the death of another personality of theirs. Thank you for everything and leave it to me. Felix narrowed his eyes coldly as he watched the virtual god scream at the top of his lungs. Whether it was the primogenitors, Felix's enemies, his friends, and even regular viewers, every one of them believed that this was the ending. It was an intense and quite an insane battle with great achievements for everyone involved, but this should be the ending. One player left, and the virtual god still had two heads, this should be the ending, right? Felix suddenly released the electromagnetic arcs, making him free fall into the ground. Before the viewers could assume that Felix was giving up, he mewed softy, size manipulation, x 10,000. Under the dumbfounded eyes of the viewers, Felix's size expanded at a rapid speed as he fell towards the ground. 1000 m, 2000 m, 3000 m. Thwood. Even when he smashed the ground, leaving a gigantic crater filled with ravines, he still didn't stop growing. 4000 m, 7000 m, 10,000 m. He has reached the same size as the virtual god. Holy shit! Everyone thought with their jaws on the ground that Felix would halt after reaching half the size of the virtual god. Too bad, Felix wasn't even close to his limitation as his size kept getting bigger and bigger while charging towards the virtual god. 12,000 m, 15,000 m, 19,000 m. Only after matching the size of the virtual god did he finally stop growing. Felix had truly gone all out to finish this job. Unbeknownst to anyone, his current size was powered by merely what remained of his energy tank as he had no infinite void energy. As for using the conversion technique, he knew that it would be too noticeable with his current size, which would expose him to the primogenitors that he owned 3 perfect manipulations. I have 20 seconds before I pass out. Felix narrowed his eyes coldly while enlarging his crystallized pole to match his size, shocking the viewers even more. With the white poisonous cloud released around his crotch and buttocks to hide them, he truly resembled Hercules on a quest to slay a god. Before the viewers could react to this inconceivable sight, Felix swung the giant crystallized pole with everything he got at 3-eyed head. Without metal element to defend or light element to escape away, the 3-eyed head could only stare at the incoming cosmic pole and try his very best to block it with his telekinesis. Unfortunately, his mental prowess had taken a big hit against Midgard N8, making him face the immeasurable crystallized pole's force in his weakened state. The result, It penetrated his telekinesis shield without much resistance and landed on the top of his scalp, causing his skull to immediately blow out akin to a watermelon. The force was still not completely negated as it traveled to the rest of his body, breaking most of his right shoulder's bones and arms. Crack! The rest of the force reached the ground and managed to leave humongous long chasms with Felix and the virtual god in the center. It was like the force also reached the viewers as every one of them felt goosebumps travel through their skin at the sight of Felix standing a mere meter taller than the virtual god. It was barely noticeable, and it shouldn't matter much, but in the hearts of the viewers it was everything. The last surviving head cried painfully after being left all alone. His stoic and cold expression was no longer seen as he was finally forced to participate in this fight. As last countermeasures to protect himself, he unleashed a flood of hot red lava from what remained out of his skin, wanting to force Felix away. Unfortunately, the only response he got was a wide cold smirk from Felix. "Why do you think I left you last?" Felix said as he allowed himself to be completely covered in lava without an ounce of fear or worry. Forget about the viewers, even the virtual god seemed like he was too stunned to speak by the sight of his most offensive element being completely useless against Felix. Felix always trusted in his fire immunity to protect him against lava since its base damage was still heat. He was immune to all kinds of heat, regardless of what source it came from. Die. Without a single second wasted, Felix pulled back his crystallized pole and held it with both of his arms before swinging it at the salamander's head akin to a baseball batter. However, the salamander's head didn't make it easy for him as he protected his head with helmet made out of hardened magma. Boom! The crystallized pole managed to break the hardened magma, but the rest of the force merely bruised the salamander's head. To make matters worse, the virtual god seemed like he sensed that Felix couldn't maintain his godly form as he entered into a fortified defense. He kept releasing hardened magma to create shields and walls around him while simultaneously manifesting hundreds of gigantic meteors in the sky above him. Whoosh whoosh! He made them fall down on both himself and Felix. Felix knew that he couldn't use his elemental energy to protect himself against the meteor shower. 10 seconds, I can't retreat. Time wasn't in his favor, making him go absolutely wild in his attacks, smashing one barrier after another. Boom boom boom. At the same time, the gigantic meteors kept crashing on his head and the rest of his body before breaking apart into fragments. Felix might be immune to fire, but the force still bruised him and made his head bleed. Still Felix toughened through the pain and dizziness to keep his never-ending onslaught. 5 seconds, I can't make it, I actually won't make it. Sadly, no matter how many protective magma walls he broke apart, double that amount gets created. This made Felix's confidence to win this get hit with each second ticking by. This is bad. The virtual god might have only one head, but he still possessed an insane amount of elemental energy, and if he focused purely on defense, he can survive for plenty of time. Asna bit her nails nervously, knowing that Felix couldn't afford to maintain his size forever. The viewers might not know the exact time, but they discerned that Felix's form had a short duration. If not, he would have used it from the very start of the fight. This exact reasoning was what keeping Daydreamer and Mipapo from making their move at such a chaotic and dangerous environment. They knew that if they got themselves involved in such a battle between two godly entities, they might regret it. So, they kept waiting patiently for the perfect opportunity. 3 seconds, am I actually going to fail slaying him after everything I went through? The more Felix thought about all the struggles he went through in the entire game, the angrier he became. Felix rarely got pissed or lost his cool during a fight, since he knew that cool-headedness was always the key to winning hard fights. But no matter how much he squeezed his brain for a solution to end this battle in those 3 seconds, he failed to come up with anything. Elemental abilities couldn't be used, and he knew that retreating now would merely present an opportunity to Mipapo and Daydreamer to steal his kill. In other words, he was absolutely stumped. *CK this. I refuse to let this game end in this manner. Felix's eye suddenly turned bloodshot as he screamed with a crazed expression, I refuse. Just like he had pressed on a long-lost button, Felix's dragon heart began pumping extremely hot blood through his entire body. This made his body turn crimson from bottom to top, making him resemble a fiendish demonic creature from hell itself. To add even more flavor, extremely hot smoke kept releasing Felix's skin with each movement he made. Dragon Fury innate ability was finally activated. This caused the viewers' eyes to pop out of their sockets, having absolutely no clue what the hell was going on. Even the primogenitors were taken back, making them unable to take their eyes off Felix, whose speed, strength, and just raw prowess looked like it had doubled. Boom boom boom. The magma shields and walls, which were causing Felix a great deal of pain before, were now getting blown into countless fragments with one swing from him. As for the meteors, they hit Felix's body and exploded on the spot, not managing to even stagger him for a little. This caused Felix to arrive next to the virtual god before he could recreate his shields. Just like he had absolutely lost his mind, Felix didn't even aim at the head. Instead, he kept thrashing the virtual god's body from every direction, not caring about anything but turning him into a pool of meshed-up meat and blood. Under the terrified and stunned eyes of the viewers, this exactly what happened as the virtual god lost completely every sensation he had about his body. He fell into the ground broken akin to a doll with blood, flesh, bones, and limbs thrown everywhere. The only thing that was still somewhat intact was the head. The head was so close to Felix, he didn't even bother to smash it with his crystallized pole, he merely lifted his bloodied giant foot and smashed it into pieces, adding a bit more blood to his already completely tainted body. Only then did the peacefulness of the moon had been restored. Neither the viewers spoke, neither did Felix. He just kept his head lowered while having his freed long hair cover his face entirely. With his giant antlers being painted completely red, they resembled horns, which made Felix seem even more devilish than before. The sight of him inhaling and exhaling as he stood above the slain virtual god struck absolutely crippling terror in the hearts of everyone, even Daydreamer and Mipapo, who didn't dare take a single step outside the spatial pocket after seeing Felix's demonic transformation. They opened a rift, hoping to kill Steel, but their instincts completely froze their feet, making them feel like if they dared get close to Felix, only death awaited them. Suddenly, this magnificent and haunting image was broken by the sight of Felix's body getting reduced in size at a rapid pace. In less than a few seconds, he was seen floating on his back on a lake of blood with giant fleshy parts and bones around him. He had his eyes slightly closed. Sigh, I slayed the god, but at what cost? Felix cracked a faint bitter smile, knowing that he was on the verge of losing consciousness. He was completely burnt out in all departments, and he knew that regardless of what he did, he wasn't going to escape from Daydreamer and Mipapo. Even if he recovered a bit of his gemstone energy and defended himself inside a crystal sphere, Mipapo would slice him from within with his space manipulation. Whether he rejected it or not, at depth of his soul, Felix knew that his time had come. I really bit more than I can chew this time. Felix closed his eyes and said the words that no one ever imagined coming out of Felix's lips. Queen, I surrender. He murmured with a peaceful gentle smile as he finally allowed himself to lose consciousness. Felix might have said it faintly, but it resounded loudly through the hearts of his fans akin to a thunderclap. They weren't even given the time to properly cheer on Felix at his ludicrous achievement before being forced to watch him break into light particles. Felix's fans and even his enemies had no clue how to react to this bizarre scene, as no one thought it would come so soon. I must be tripping, my lord didn't just surrender. My lifelong savings is lost, haha, I must be dreaming. This isn't over yet, this isn't over yet. For Felix's fans? They were already under the impression that he was an undefeatable god, making it harder for them to believe what their eyes were feeding them. As for the primogenitors? I have to say that your kid surely knows how to put a fine show. Erebus clapped with a satisfied expression. Since most primogenitors join those games for entertainment, there was no one better at it than Felix, who always challenges his limitation. I am more surprised by his final transformation. Kumiho disclosed with a curious tone, it resembled Dragon's Fury greatly. True. Is it just me, or am I starting to believe that your boy has some relation with the dragon race? Siren shared her findings. Even the gemstones embedded on his body resembled the 9 sacred attributed gemstones. Siren might not have said everything, but everyone was sharp enough to realize that Felix was using the same attributes on his elements. I have modified his body with an ancient dragon heart, allowing him to accept the sacred attribute gemstones and harness them. Lady Sphinx stated composedly, knowing that the truth was already in the open. If so, she might as well control the narration. Is that even possible? Saurus narrowed his eyes in suspicious. I know that humans are extremely adaptive, but this is a whole different situation than just genetic modification. Plus, doesn't his elemental tank seems a bit too much? Wendigo added with a solemn tone, it shouldn't be possible for a human to have such a vast elemental tank that can support 3 elements and size manipulation of that magnitude. Siren, Kumiho, and the rest supported Saurus' doubts, understanding that Lady Sphinx shouldn't be this omnipotent to turn a human into this monster merely with genetics modification. They recognized that even if she was capable of pulling it off, Felix should have some sort of limitation that should make it impossible. Unfortunately for them, Lady Sphinx wasn't easily pressured. I don't care what you think. Lady Sphinx eyed them calmly. I'm not obliged to share the details of my experiments with anyone. We were just curious. Kumiho clicked her tongue in criticism. Siren and the others were also left somewhat displeased since Lady Sphinx had been keeping almost every experiment on Felix a secret. Even when they adopted their own humans and attempted to copy her achievements, the results ended up being quite lackluster. Congratulations to Daydreamer/Mipapo for being the team with the most points. You have won an x2 multiplier to your Empyrean points. Congratulations to Mipapo for being the player with most points. You have won another x2 multiplier to your Empyrean points. The game has been concluded. Please wait for the final performance rating to determine if you are ranked in top 50% or the bottom 50% in this game. Fortunately, Queen AI interrupted their discussion with 3 announcements that resounded 3 times in the stadium. It broke everyone from their spell. A few of Felix's fans were taken aback by the announcements, having no clue what the hell they mean. Not everyone studied the rules of the Empyrean games or bothered to even learn their basic rules, coming here merely to cheer on Felix as always. As for the majority, they felt like their souls were restored back to their bodies, finally remembering that Empyrean games were decided by overall performance and the total amount of Empyrean points earned. After all, there was no tier system that make the winner climb one tier and all the losers drop by one tier. Since there were only 500 players in the Empyrean rank, all the games were decided by performance to rank them from top to bottom, separating the top 50% and the bottom 50%. The top 50% earn Empyrean points based on their performance while the bottom 50% either lose Empyrean points or break even. Since this was an individual platform, the highest player with most Empyrean points earned, would be proclaimed as the true and sole winner of the game. This isn't over yet. Felix can still clutch rank 1 with his performance. Leo shouted as he watched the game live with the rest of the main Earthling team. You really must be dreaming, as much as I hate to admit it, but there is no way Felix is going to surpass Mipapo's total Empyrean points with his X4 multiplier. Sylvia shook her head with a pessimistic expression. We can only wait for the performance rating and wish for the best. Olivia held her hands together with a hopeful look. Noah nodded silently as he eyed all the players getting summoned back to the stadium. Give a round of applause to your champions for this astounding performance. Fang yelled passionately as he extended his hand towards Felix and the rest. Landlord! 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 The viewers thoroughly ignored his request and chanted Felix's name at the top of their lungs the moment their eyes landed on him. No one blamed them as the final scene of Felix butchering the virtual god was still fresh in their minds. He might have surrendered, but that didn't take away anything from his fight against the virtual god. Felix waved his hand with a faint smile while he was dying inside. He wasn't given even a second to rest his mind before getting summoned back. Good job, landlord, I never knew you had that much in you. Elder Forrester praised with a head nod, not bothered by Felix's name taking over the entire stadium. You really managed to pull it off and slay that unkillable cockroach. I might break even on my score because of you. Aquamia finally cracked a friendly smile at Felix. Nightguard N8 and even Jagat was low-key pleased that Felix had finished the job. After all, the death of the virtual god and their assistance was going to give them a massive bump in their performance rating, making them have more chances to be part of the top 50% performers. I did what I had to. Felix replied with a friendly tone as well. Gar, Marquise Sebastian, and Fagur had an entirely different reaction as they kept staring daggers at Felix. All three of them knew that it would take a miracle to escape being ranked in the bottom 50%. At least, we succeeded in our mission without damaging our reputation. Marquise Sebastian shared telepathically. True, we can't ask for more. Gar agreed with an irritated tone, I just hope to never land against this bastard ever again in my games. You read my mind. After the crowd had finally quietened down, Fang manifested 2 holographic screens before everyone. One was titled as the final ranking and had 10 empty ranks with question marks, the other was titled as the performance rating calculator. It was big table with many segments at the sides while the score at the top. For example, the first segment was named as Players Eliminated. Next to it, the rewarded Empyrean points were 10 for each solo eliminated player and 5 for assistance. There were also negative segments such as using surrender coupon. Any player who used it would have 50 Empyrean points removed from his total score in the game. If he didn't earn that much, they will be removed from his total, which would reduce his Empyrean rank if the one below him had more. There were tens of segments, making sure to encompass everything that a player could give in a single game. Naturally, the segments differed from one game to another. As always, we will leave the calculations to our sweet and fair Queen AI. Fang disclosed. Queen AI didn't waste a split second as she highlighted Marquise Sebastian's name first, making him flinch. Kill one celestial with assistance equals +7 EP / using surrender coupon equals -50 EP. Queen AI announced as she wrote the final score on the table, Marquise Sebastian -43 EP. The moment the judgment was placed down, Marquise Sebastian automatically was placed as number 1 in the final ranking list. F***ck, how humiliating. Marquis Sebastian tightened his fists under his long sleeves, not pleased one bit by his tragic score. Fortunately for him, there wasn't much laughter since everyone saw that Felix was the one F***ing him over and ruining his chances to stay in the game. Queen AI didn't care about his emotions and picked the next player to calculate his performance. It was none other than Fagor, who also had an abysmal result due to getting kicked out early. The worst part? He had more Empyrean points reduced since he was eliminated directly by a player. Fortunately, he had killed a couple of Celestials, making him emerge with -30 EP as a final result. Queen AI moved on to Gar, Aquamia, Night Guard N8, Jagat, and Elder Forester. After finishing with their calculation, the final ranking was close to completion. It appeared like this. /1, Night Guard N8, plus 60 EP. 2, Jagat, plus 55 EP. 3, Elder Forester, plus 45 EP. 4, Gar, the Darkness Manifester, plus 35 EP. 5, Aquamia, plus 20 EP. 6, Fagor, minus 30 EP. 7, Marquis Sebastian, minus 45 EP. 8, 9, 10, // When Mipapo and Daydreamer saw the insane number of Empyrean points rewarded to Night Guard N8 and the rest of his partners in crime, they couldn't help but feel their hearts skip a beat. If Night Guard N8 was given a whopping 50 EP for his assistance in slaying the virtual god, how much Landlord is going to get? Mipapo gulped a mouthful, feeling a sense of dread and worry creeping on his spine. As the MVP of this game, he shouldn't be feeling any threat since all MVPs get ranked as number 1 always. After all, X4 multiplier just made it almost impossible to surpass the MVP players. You are thinking too much. Daydreamer spoke with a composed tone, you will be getting at least 50 points and with your X4 multiplier, you will hit plus 200 EP. Unlike Landlord, you don't have any penalties to reduce your score. I doubt Landlord will surpass even my score. I guess you are right. Mipapo regained control over his emotions and watched Queen AI calculate the performance of Daydreamer. In a few moments, Queen AI announced that Daydreamer had earned plus 50 EP from everything he had done in the game. With the multiplier applied, his score became plus 100 EP and jumped straight to rank 1. *T, he earned that much without even last hitting a single Celestial. Enir cursed, knowing that Mipapo's score was going to be frightening. His assumption wasn't far from the truth as Mipapo's performance had earned him plus 260 EP after both multipliers were applied. He left everyone gawking at his score, feeling like an unbridgeable chasm. Even the most optimistic fan of Felix felt like their hopes had shattered. I guess no one is winning anything in this game. Erebus chuckled, knowing that the primogenitor's bets were placed solely on the player in first rank. If it wasn't their champion, the bet gets cancelled off instead of considering the second best. Before we start the performance rating of Landlord, we have to honor his achievement. Ulfang suddenly announced, stopping the Queen from calculating Felix's score. Felix raised an eyebrow in surprise, having no idea what he was talking about. His reaction was shared by the rest of the players. In this game, I have placed a special unique title. Ulfang announced, alarming the players and the viewers. When he saw the players' confusion, he couldn't help but curse in his mind, arrogant pricks, you would have known about it if you asked me in the Q&A segment. Still, Ulfang pushed down his disgruntlement and displayed a brilliant and mesmerizing holographic title written in bold letters. The God's Lair, he who defies his mortal limits. When Felix's fans read it, they went into a frenzied excited state yet again. Well, with how tough that F***er was, it was only natural that a title will be bestowed to its slayer. Aquamia stated, not too shocked. The other players shared the same reaction as her. However, what came next did shock them all right as Ulfang continued on, the game's details might not have stated the exact prowess of the virtual god, but I am here to tell you that it's comparable to the top 20 players in the universe. Dear Lord, you're telling me Landlord has slain a leader-ranked player? Gar's eyes almost popped out of their sockets at such frightening notion. Everyone else couldn't help but suck a deep cold breath as they eyed Felix like they were staring at a monster. They knew that he was strong, they had seen his full power against the virtual god, but they had absolutely no idea that it would be so close to top 20 ranked players. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Jagat scoffed. The virtual god might possess comparable raw prowess to top 20 players, but his battle experience and intelligence were absolutely **T. Indeed, if we were against real top 20 players, even 100 of us wouldn't have scratched them. Marquise Sebastian agreed. Even Felix agreed with their conclusion. He knew that the top 20 players were all leaders of the strongest races or at least guardians on the same level. So, he didn't let the glorious title pump his ego even a bit. After the crowd quietened down, Ulfang requested, "Queen, please conclude the performance rating." Queen AI jumped right on it by displaying Felix's name on the table. Almost everyone held their breath as they saw her calculate Felix's Empyrean points for each segment. Eliminated one player directly alone, plus 10 EP/ participated in eliminating a teammate, minus 5 EP. Killed 6 Celestial alone, plus 10 EP/ kill steal 1 Celestial, plus 15 EP/ assisted in killing a Celestial, plus 5 EP. Proposing main strategy and taking leadership role in fighting the virtual god, plus 10 EP. Damn, he reached 95 EP without any help. This score alone had made the hearts of the players turn colder since it demonstrated just how much Felix had outperformed them without any backup. Thankfully, Mipapo's heart was put at ease after hearing Queen AI add, using surrender coupon, minus 50 EP. This had halved Felix's score, reducing it to merely plus 45 EP. Still, everyone didn't react much knowing that moment of truth was finally going to happen. Queen AI didn't care for dramatic waits as she announced immediately, total participation in the death of the virtual god, 95%, plus 150 EP. Not even close. Mipapo immediately cheered with an excited tone after seeing that Felix's total score was merely 195 EP. Felix had gathered this insane amount without a single multiplier, just the fact that he had surpassed Daydreamer by an entire 95 EP was an achievement on its own. Unfortunately, history remember only the winners. That's what everyone believed until Queen AI started speaking again, activate multiplier, total score 390 EP. Performance rating is over, congratulations to Landlord for emerging as number 1 in this game. Queen AI announced one last time before placing Felix's name at the top of the final ranking list under the dumbfounded and stunned eyes of the viewers and players. This can't be, what do you mean by he has a multiplier? Mipapo's joy was cut short by the announcement, making him unable to accept the final verdict. Even his teammate Daydreamer was taken back, though, unlike him, he immediately figured out what was going on. How foolish of me to forget such detail. Daydreamer smiled wryly as he eyed Felix, who was chuckling with a relieved look. Unlike Mipapo and the rest of the viewers and players, Felix already knew that he had won the game immediately after he heard his first score. How could he forget about the multiplier given to him due to participating in a game with 355 average rank while he was still at the bottom of the Empyrean ranking? One of the main reasons he decided to join this high-leveled game was for this multiplier. It came in with the clutch and saved him when he least expected. Ho-oh-ah-ah! Landlord! Landlord! Landlord!